Owarimonogatari series by Nizio Izan, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. Ogi Oshino is Ogi Oshino. That is the entirety of what can be said as far as that transfer student is concerned. Once you state her name, there's nothing left to say on the subject. You could, of course, make the point that everyone is someone, and absolutely no one else ultimately. That is all that should be said about any person. Tsubasa Hanakawa is Tsubasa Hanakawa, and Hitadi Senjogahara is Hitadi Senjogahara, yes. Just as Koyomi Araragi is Koyomi Arara. But even then, Ogi Oshino was just so Ogi Oshino. She was so singularly Ogi Oshino that she was nothing else. Ogi Oshino is Ogi Oshino in the same way you don't like things you don't like. How no means no. Any further discussion would be fruitless, utterly so. In the sense that she's so firmly defined, so wholly decided and determined, so completely unshakable. She is extremely mathematical? Yes, second only to how much she is Ogi Oshino. Speaking of math, are you familiar with what they call the most beautiful formula in the history of mathematics? Wait, don't even answer that, you'll recall it once you hear it. If you ask me, forget math? I want to say it's the most beautiful formula in human history. Ijrik plus 1 equals 0, also known as Euler's formula. It uses E, the base of the natural logarithm, P, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, I, the unit imaginary number, then 1 and 0, all in the same graceful formula, as if it had come together by such design necessity that if there is a God, it'd be the most convincing evidence for his existence. What's interesting, rather, what's beautiful, is how this formula had to exist. There's your answer, if you ever get asked that on a test. In other words, Euler's formula is not a product of human expression, but of human excavation. Even if mankind had never existed in this world, even if there wasn't a single brain to think about the base of the natural logarithm, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, imaginary numbers, 1 or 0, the base of the natural logarithm raised to the power of the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, multiplied by the unit imaginary number, added to 1 would have still been 0. It's beautiful, but when you think about it in that way, it's also scary. It seems that in society these days what we call the world is a vague and hazy thing, mutable and subject to being turned on its head with the greatest of ease. Yesterday's common sense becoming today's senselessness. The rules in the morning breaking the rules at night, not one value set in stone. All of us aimless and adrift, which is why the future as a blank slate is the only thing that can give us hope. Or so it seems, but really isn't the future, which is to say the unknown, already determined, and we just don't know. Instead of it being the unknown, maybe we're just uninformed? If someone who doesn't know the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter calculated it, the result would be pi. The theory of relativity was always there, even if Einstein never used the full powers of his brilliance. You don't have to know who Beethoven is in order to produce the sounds of Symphony No. 5. You just have to play the notes from its score. What? You wouldn't be as moved? In that case, just play it the same way as the version that does move you. As hard as it is to believe, likewise you don't have to be the genius among geniuses, Vincent van Gogh, to come up with sunflowers. Even the rankest of novices could, simply by using the same strokes, pressure, and materials in the same environment, from the same perspective to paint the same flowers. Let monkeys bash typewriters for long enough and they'll eventually produce Shakespeare, right? Answers don't change, laws don't change. When people feel that something has changed or become new, it's nothing more than a cute little illusion arising from the fact that a different pre-existing program has been executed. In that sense, there's nothing in the world or its future that even resembles a playful ambiguity or vague margin. What exists are only hard laws that state, do X and Y will happen. Just as how you don't like things you don't like, how no means no. Not only is what's set in stone, there is no room there to impose your will, no opening for your heart. Therefore all expression is only excavation. All that's devised is only discovered. No, even these discoveries may only be rediscoveries. Even the impossible task that continues to torment me as I desperately seek its solution might have a ready-made model answer. All of my trial and error nothing more than a detour on the way to arriving at it, from the perspective of someone in the know. Someone in the know, a monster perhaps. Still, Ogi Oshino, the transfer student, might offer some frank advice regarding even the beauty of Euler's formula. Something like this. Yes, it's beautiful. So beautiful and gorgeous that I could faint. The most beautiful part of all is the way the answer is 0. That said, I feel like there isn't really any reason to calculate all that out if the answer is just going to be 0. Upon hearing this, I would think, Ogi Oshino is Ogi Oshino, and that's all there is to say about it. Everything is 0 before her, and no matter how unlike herself she may act, that act becomes so much like her. And so this is a tale about math. Let's do some studying. I know some of you might put your guard up when you hear the word math, so we could break that down and say this is a story about arithmetic, or to be even more straightforward, a story about numbers. After all, this is a story whose solution is decided by the larger number, which is to say, it's a story about majority rule. Majority rule, the one way to turn even something wrong into the truth. A building block system that seeks collusion, not happiness. Our inequality formulating iniquity. You could say it's the one true human invention, as well as the ugliest formula in human history. If any of you've experienced being locked in an enigmatic classroom alone with an underclassman, you're meeting for the first time and an hour has already passed, I would have loved to ask you for advice, of course. My phone seemed to be out of service, and the room appeared to block any Wi-Fi signal as well. Even seeking outside advice appeared to be beyond me.
No good, Araragi-senpai.
Ogi trotted over to me with tiny steps as I frantically used the full strength of my hands and feet to try and open the classroom's front door.
I don't mean that you're no good. I tried a lot of different things, but neither large window nor high window budged an inch, is what I'm trying to say.
How'd I ever misinterpret it as no good Araragi-senpai in this situation? What kind of an aside was that? No good either.
No good, huh? That's what I thought.
You're doing it on purpose, aren't you? Trying to make me sound no good. Oh, not even a smidge, Ogi denied with the smile of someone playing dumb. Then again, despite her full bright smile, she didn't seem to me like someone who liked jokes too much. I decided to believe her for the time being. From the moment we learned that we were apparently locked in there, Ogi and I had divided up the labor and attempted every escape method possible, me trying the regular entrances and exits, which is to say the doors at the front and back, while she investigated the windows. It isn't like they're locked, it's like they've been fixed in place with glue or something. I gave my thoughts on the matter, stretching my numbed arms around and around, after close to an hour in combat with the doors. As a senior, it was a little embarrassing to have spent a full hour to come to an or something conclusion, but facts were facts. Meanwhile, Ogia Naoetsu High Novice, a freshman and transfer student, shared her own better-informed findings with a soft smile.
Right. As stated above, the windows are not budging 1 inch. Regarding any locks, the crescent ones installed on the windows are mobile. You can engage and disengage them freely. They can even be locked once engaged. The all-important window frame is when the crescent locks are engaged, of course, but also when they aren't, as if they've been fixed in place with glue. Something, as you put it.
By imitating my childish expression at the end, was she deferring to me as her senior or trying to insult me? Debatable. Every window, without exception?
Yes. Of course I gave each one a try. I'd never use a sample survey to cut corners, the large windows, the hallway windows, the gym side windows.
They don't move, she reported. The gym side windows, I muttered, turning to look in that direction. To be honest, it wasn't the fact we were locked in, but that side, that direction, that was the real problem. True, there was nothing visibly off about it. There was no world of demons on the other side of the window, no pack of dinosaurs or sea of flames. All I saw was a plain gym Naoetsu High's regular old gym. The basketball team that Kanbari retired from was probably busy at work inside. Well, I couldn't hear any sounds coming from it, but maybe any external noise had been shut out from the classroom? The ban on entering and exiting was comprehensive if it included sound, but even that didn't seem to be a problem, not compared to what I saw on the other side of the window. No, like I said, the gym was just a plain gym. Nothing unusual about the site except we shouldn't have been able to see the gym given the angle of the school building we were in. Normally, we should be seeing the school field from here. Yes, this building that Ogi and I had walked to stood parallel to the athletic field. We should have been able to espy the baseball team or the track team from where we were, not the indoor basketball team. I felt like sticking my body out of the window, turning my head to look about, and getting a better understanding of what I was seeing outside. But even that was out of the question. Since the windows didn't so much as open, all I could do was get an unnatural, uncanny feeling from our regular old gym. Or maybe I was confused? Could I have come to a building facing the gym by accident, instead of the building facing the athletic grounds? No, I'd never make such an awful mistake, not when I was trying to show off to an underclassman I was meeting for the first time. To begin with, the way we could see the gym from the window was unnatural. We were supposed to be on the 3rd floor. Unless we were on the 5th floor, or at least the 4th. The roof shouldn't have been visible if I'd brought us to the wrong building though. It was certainly possible we were on the wrong floor. But even if seeing something that shouldn't have been there was due to some mishap, it didn't change the fact that Ogi and I were currently shut in a room. Still, apart from sticking my body out of a window, was there no way of figuring out what floor we were on? Just as I was spinning my wheels.
Then maybe it's about time
About time? For what?
to take to more extreme measures. I mean, both you and I are going to starve if we don't do something. We'll starve and wither and die.
Yeah, I guess. Starving to death sounded a bit exaggerated at this point in time, but it was an inevitability if we continued to be stuck there. I mean, I felt confident that I could endure a little hunger, but the same couldn't be said about Ogi, who was still in the middle of her growth spurt. But more extreme measures? When I turned to ask her what she meant, I saw there was no reason to. It was clear as day. Ogi was holding up, with both arms, one of the many desks that lined the classroom, as if it was cleaning time and they needed to be moved so that the floor could be wiped down, but she wanted to do the complete opposite, to make a mess.
1, 2.
On her own count, Ogi tossed the desk at the window. Not the hallway window, but the gym side one, which should have been facing the athletic grounds. The hallway window was too dangerous in case someone was walking on the other side. She told me later, but I don't see much of a difference in risk between that and hurling it out of the building. In fact, the added potential energy, whether we were on the 3rd floor or the 5th, could make both the broken glass and the flying desk that much more dangerous. The desk that Obi threw at the window, which is to say at the glass, also naturally bounced off it like a super ball off a hard wall, expelling the contents textbooks, notebooks, pencil case onto the classroom floor. It seemed the owner wasn't much for taking homework home, and the jumble could only be described as a pitiful sight. As for the desk, it came to a rest upside down, but not before a number of bounces. There wasn't a single scratch on the glass. On that same note, the desk that came bouncing back, as well as its scattered contents, wasn't destroyed or cracked. The extreme measure Ogi had taken resulted in no results whatsoever. Maybe you could have thrown a desk that didn't have anything in it? Considering the aftermath. I nitpicked, but really, if we were going to go there, did she have to force herself to toss a desk? Wasn't a chair easier to hold? This was glass she was trying to break. So even if using her bare hands was out of the question, why would a slender-armed girl like her, by no means well-built, choose a desk? But my doubts were soon addressed. Which is to say, Ogi picked up a ballpoint pen, which was once inside a pencil case, from among the stuff scattered on the floor. With it in hand, she walked toward the blackboard, as if tossing not a chair but a packed desk at the window had killed 2 birds with 1 stone, and she'd saved herself the trouble of extracting the pen. Call it rational or lazy, but as my doubt was addressed, a new one popped up. What exactly was she going to do with the pen? A click drew my attention, and it seemed she'd extended its tip, but you wrote on blackboards with chalk, not with finger. I didn't even have time to stop her. She scraped the blackboard with the ballpoint pen. Across the classroom, more sealed than usual, that awful screeching noise that torments the nerves worse than any other didn't spread. There was no sound. It didn't seem like she'd held back. She'd slashed as if she were wielding a katana. Yet no marks were left behind on the blackboard, not even the pen's ink. I almost began to think that my eyes had been tricked into thinking she'd scratched it while she'd whiffed somehow.
No good?
What were you trying to do there, Ogi?
Well, since I couldn't destroy the window with a strike, I thought I'd try to shatter it using acoustic resonance.
She casually informed me. So this girl nonchalantly attempted something as advanced as destroy a window through sonic force, but she'd failed. And as if she'd accounted for this from the start, her expression stayed nonchalant as she tossed the pen to the floor. Throwing a desk to try to break a window and to procure a ballpoint pen at the same time might be rational, but leaving such a mess in the process is surely irrational, I thought, tidying up the area to return the classroom to its original state. But then, wasn't it rational in its own way to make such a big mess that I'd want to clean up, just as I was doing? As I gathered the textbooks and placed them inside the desk that I'd flipped back up, I caught a glimpse of the name written on them in Sharpie. Fukato, Class 1-3. So this was a first-year classroom? It had to be, since that's what it said. I hadn't looked closely at the sign upon entering. In fact, I didn't even recall if there was a sign to begin with. But wait, Fukato? Well, I guess it was a common enough name.
I'm sorry to interrupt you when you're busy at work, but could you please come over this way?
Ogi's voice derailed my train of thought. I wanted to tell her I was busy tidying up the mess she'd made, but I stopped picking up for a moment anyway and began walking toward the front door, which I'd been battling until moments earlier, and where Ogi had moved without me noticing.
Oh, no, back up a step, please. A little to the right. No, too much. To the left. Puff out your chest a little there.
Her instructions were so detailed, I didn't have a clue as to what she was trying to do, or why she was trying to do it, because I was assuming she'd decided to give her violent approaches toward the classroom a rest after throwing a desk at a window and scraping the blackboard. But no, she had another trick to try, and it was one hell of a violent one. Just as I thought she was bending her knees low, Ogi unleashed a powerful elbow thrust into my solar plexus, ripping straight through me before my reflexes could spring into action. Gawk! With my chest puffed out just as instructed, my body acted like a spring, bending at a right angle before falling head over heels and collapsing on the spot. My head nearly hit the door thanks to the sheer force, but only grazed it, and I lay cowering on the floor. Oh, what? Ogi. She deadpanned, looking at me with scorn as I struggled to so much as breathe. She showed zero signs of guilt.
Well, I just thought I might be able to erode the door with stomach acid. You know, even if strikes and resonance don't work, we might still be able to melt it away. Looks like that approach doesn't get it done either, though. All we did was make the door filthy. Not that a couple of drops of your stomach acid would dissolve the entire thing. Anyway, wipe it down for me later, okay?
She'd aimed not for my solar plexus, but my stomach. Her goal had been to make me spew bile. The girl did some crazy things with that gentle expression of hers. Why did I have to get sucker punched by a girl I was meeting for the first time? What had I done to deserve this?
Oh, sorry. Did that hurt?
She asked so shamelessly that I couldn't even be mad. In fact, it was almost refreshing, and to tell the truth, I was fortunate enough to be used to this level of violence. Given my home environment, what kind of domestic abusers did I live with to be used to getting punched in the stomach? Forget this life, I must be dealing with karma from a previous one. Not really, it's no big deal. I tried to keep up appearances as I got up. Then again, while acting calm was one thing, if this was what I got for trying to impress an underclassman, it was probably about time I reconsidered my stance.
I knew I could count on you. I wouldn't have minded spewing my own stomach acid, but I thought it might be a little too extreme of a visual. You're the type who'd rather hawk up his own digestive juices than make a girl puke hers, so I saw fit to defer to you.
How very considerate. And yes, I'm the type who'd rather spit up his own stomach acid than cause a girl to do the same. This was far too specific as far as personality traits go, not to mention the bizarre underlying assumption that someone had to vomit, but I went along with Ogi's conversation as she stood there, smiling. Whether it was the smile of someone relying on an upperclassman's kindness, or of someone making a total fool of him, was once again hard to tell. So unfathomable. It really did make sense that she was his niece despite looking nothing at all like him. In any case, this means the windows and the doors can't be destroyed. We of course don't have any professional tools at our disposal, so I doubt we'd be able to plow through a wall, either.
If only we had some plastic explosives.
Troublingly, since I could see her using a bomb without a second thought if she had access to one, considering how quick she'd been to elbow me. Of course, whether or not that would work was a different question. We might not come out of it unscathed. For one thing. Yikes. Looks like we're in this for the long haul. The real threat here is driving ourselves crazy by struggling and failing to get out. Let's just wait for someone on the outside to help us. Ogi, luckily, Kanbaru knows we're here. I wasn't as relaxed as that, to be honest, but I wanted to make this junior of mine feel safe and show her just how mature I was. From her perspective, just being locked in the same space as a boy she was meeting for the first time must have been worrying enough. In that light, her earlier elbow strike could be interpreted as a kind of threat, an expression of her apprehension. Whatever the case, it felt like I was being tested as a man through my actions, or that the wrong choice could lead to my downfall.
I wonder.
Ogi sounded calm, not concerned at all, but might have been putting on a brave face just like me.
As a a big fan of hers. I'd love it too if Kanbara-senpai saved us, but I'm afraid our chances of anyone on the outside rescuing us are slim.
Why's that? 2 students suddenly disappearing after school. Somebody would have to notice that, even if it wasn't Kanbar. There'd be an uproar among your classmates and mine. Uproar might have been an exaggeration. My own classmates, at least, would treat my disappearance as nothing out of the ordinary, including Senjogahara and Hanakawa. But in Oji's case, a fresh transfer going missing would get people talking. Plus, they'd know we never left school since we didn't take our bags. Soon enough, someone would find us here.
You really do like depending on other people, don't you? Even though people just go and get saved on their own. I'm sorry, that's my uncle's creed, not anything to do with you or me. That said, while counting on others isn't such a bad thing, we mustn't give up on trying to escape on our own just yet. I say that because...
Obi pointed at the clock hanging above the blackboard, and I froze the moment I saw it. The clock's hands. From the moment we'd entered the classroom, the hands of the clock hadn't budged a single second or minute. We should have been locked in for over an hour by now, but not a second had passed inside the classroom.
Do you think it's out of batteries? Because I certainly don't.
She said, smirking. It all started on a late October day, exactly half a year after I was attacked by a golden-haired, golden-eyed vampire during spring break. Just as I was about to have lunch at my homeroom desk, my lovable junior Saruga Kanbaru came to visit.
Hey there, Araragi-senpai! It's me, Saruga Kanbaru!
She was as energetic as ever.
So you're alone? All alone.
She was also as rude as ever. I don't know if I'd say alone. Well, part of me was simply overwhelmed and shrank in the face of all her positive energy. Senjogahara and Hanakawa have gotten really chummy ever since second term started. Now they won't eat with me. They were on a lunch date, no doubt. It was a rare case of female friendship overcoming romance.
Then why not eat with some of your other friends? There's nothing sadder than lunching alone.
Pressed Kanbara with no consideration whatsoever. I didn't dispute her point, but it's also true that humans need to eat to survive even if they don't have any friends. Sadness, desolation, they're a part of life, aren't they? Still, I couldn't believe her. She'd walked into a third-year classroom undaunted, as if she might even grab an open seat without asking. Retired or not, it was indeed the kind of move you'd expect from a former star the entire school over.
But I'm here with some good news for my sad little senior.
Good news? Interesting, tell me more. I love good news. I wasn't that interested, but any topic was preferable to how sad I was eating lunch on my own. Whether it was international relations, talk about the IT industry, good news or bad news.
Okay, there's actually a girl I want to introduce you to.
Kanbaru said, pointing her left hand, wrapped again and again in a bandage, toward the entrance, where a petite girl stood in the hallway, half her body peeking inside. Kanbaru wanted to introduce me to... that girl? Who could it be? I'd never seen her before. No, of course I hadn't if she wanted to introduce us. A junior from her time on the basketball team? But why would Kanbaru want to introduce me to the girl, a stranger? Looking at her, I got the feeling she was a first year. She was too far for me to see her, that is, many at her.
Cute, right?
Kanbara said, as if that dispelled any and all doubts, but sure, that's actually kind of how the world works.
I know it's pretty risky to introduce you to a cute girl, but what was I supposed to do? She asked me to introduce you herself. It was a bitter decision. Phew! Good thing Senjogahara-senpai and Hanakawa-senpai happened to be out.
How exactly do you see me?
As being closer to human than beast?
Correct, but... It almost seemed like she'd timed her visit. Senjogahara and Hanakawa weren't around, just so happening to be somewhere else today. But they had lunch in our classroom more often than not. In which case I was still excluded. Kanbaru couldn't have been waiting for this moment. Though could she? In any case, introduce me to a girl. As you know, I don't have the most social of personalities, and am not a big fan of meeting new people, whatever their age or gender, but I didn't expect the hyper-social Kanbaru, who loved meeting people she didn't know, to understand the subtleties at play here. If I told her, sorry, I'm not great at meeting people for the first time, I'd simply be met with, then let's work on getting better at it. Of course, I had introduced Kanbaru to someone 2 months earlier. I was more of an intermediary than an introducer, but I still felt guilty about bringing a rather dangerous individual into her life, even if I'd had no choice. And in fact, I'd also introduced her to my violent little sister Karen before that. So if Kanbar wanted to introduce me to someone, I had to oblige her, whoever it might be. Seriously, her network of friends was so vast that it could be anyone. Not that the girl waiting for Kanbaru's cue outside the classroom looked shady, but there was something indescribable about her.
Don't worry, my senior. Everything is going to be okay.
Kanbaru grinned as if she'd detected my unease.
I made sure she took off her underwear.
Go back to wherever it is you came from and stay there.
Please, relax. I know I said I made her take off her underwear, but I'm just talking about her panties. She still has her bra on. You're the type who likes to take a girl's bra off himself, yes?
You come into our third-year classroom to say this? I don't belong to any type or team! Given Kanbaru's fame at our school, the other students were already paying attention to our conversation, finding it odd that we were having one. Fortunately, no one around us seemed to have heard any of her perverted words, only my verbal abuse aimed at her. All I had to suffer through were the pointed looks of criticism for daring to act like her senior. In other words, it wasn't at all fortunate for me, but it was at least more fortunate than the world discovering how much of a freak Kanbaru is.
Huh? So you even want to take her panties off yourself? What a man! When it comes to girls, you really want to take the situation by the collar. Oh, but I don't mean that in a BDSM way.
Yeah, I wish I could put a collar on you, and I don't mean that in a BDSM way either. What I really wanted to put on her was a bell, but this was just Kanbar's idea of a joke, her way of saying hello. I'd gotten used to it by now. And what's with the girl? What's her true identity? You want to introduce her to me? I'm not someone worth being introduced to. Do you know what Koyomi Aragi's catchphrase is? The man who always has to introduce himself?
What a sad catchphrase. It's not even catchy. Listen, she says she wants advice from you. That's why I want you to meet her.
Advice? From me? Hold on, now it's really getting ridiculous. Do you know how often people give the advice? No matter who you ask for advice, just don't ask Arabi.
Really? People around here are giving that kind of advice? I'll beat them up if they are.
Stop. I'm kidding. I found myself having to talk down Kanbaru, who was glaring at my classmates with an uncivil air about her. From their perspective, it must have looked like I was refusing to let the star athlete cut our conversation short and leave, further plummeting my favorability rating. But, listen, I saved all of you. It was all the more urgent since she'd proved a couple of months ago that her left hand still had the power to beat anyone up. So, what's this about advice? I mean, I'm the Fire Sister's big brother after all. I've been known to give advice. I don't mind one bit. She does have an introduction from you.
I haven't heard the details myself, but it seems like it has something to do with aberrations.
Wow. Oh. With aberrations? Kanbar saw my uneasy expression and said,
Yeah, it seems like she knows about them. She knew about my left hand too, and about your blood. She said her uncle told her. Ha!
Her uncle?
She's a first year who just transferred into the school. I was shocked to hear it, but apparently she's Mr. Oshino's niece. Her name's Ogi Oshino.
I turned my still uneasy face to her for another look to look at half of Ogi Oshino. That's when our eyes met for the first time. Her eyes were black-like. They could suck you in.
It's funny, you see.
Funny.
It's strange.
Strange.
In other words, it's abnormal.
Abnormal. And errant. Oji Oshino pointed to a sketch in the notebook sitting open on top of my desk and spoke in an unconcerned tone. I recalled facing Miss Gain and doing something similar in August, but we used a tablet in that meeting, not a notebook. It's not unusual for high schoolers to be using tablets these days, but maybe analog technology suited her better, as you might expect from Oshino's niece. There in the notebook was a structural layout of Naotsu High. I could see why she'd show it to someone she'd only met for the first time. It was impressive, so good it made me wonder if she'd use professional tools to draw it. You could take it and post it by the entrance of the building if you wanted.
It's funny, you see.
Ogi repeated, still pointing to a specific part of the layout. As we spoke, I split my time about evenly between looking at the diagram and at her eyes, those eyes that seemed like they could suck me in. It reminded me of how Miss Gain once called herself Meme Oshino's little sister. While at the time I wondered why it was little and not big sister, and thought that she said the most arbitrary things, I suppose there was at least someone real she was hinting at with that title. Come to think of it, of course Miss Gain wouldn't say anything arbitrary. Still, why was that expert's niece transferring into my school after he left our town in June? Kanbaru probably dismissed it with nothing more than a fate brings people together in the strangest ways. But as someone who'd experienced what happened with Hachikuji,
Are you listening to...
I quickly gathered myself when she noticed how distracted I was. Wow, why don't you sit down, Obi-chan? I was just thinking it must be hard for you to explain all this when you're standing. The chairs around there belong to kids who are on the athletic grounds, and they probably won't be coming back until the bell. I tried this excuse because I did feel guilty about sitting there and forcing an underclassman I was meeting for the first time to stand, but Ogi declined. Kanbaro never ended up sitting either, but the way Ogi declined was what amazed me.
Sorry, but I'm a germaphobe. I don't want to sit in a chair when I don't know who's been using it.
Is that so? A germaphobe. Well, I thought, guess she'd never be able to live in that abandoned, no longer existent cram school the way her uncle had.
I wouldn't mind sitting on your lap, though.
Stop it.
Oh, I bet you were thinking something naughty just now.
Ogi clapped with glee. She was just goofing off like any high school freshman, but that wasn't enough to do away with the unfathomable impression she gave off. You're the one who said something naughty. You can stand there as punishment.
Man, you're so strict.
And what were we talking about? What's funny again?
The bone on your arm that makes it numb if you hit it, nah. I don't mean funny in a humorous way. Well, I've had to transfer schools a lot thanks to what you'd call family issues, or maybe personal issues. So often that I don't even remember how many schools I've transferred into.
Huh. That must be tough. Now that I think about it, I guess Kanbara transferred schools when she was in elementary too. Kanbara was now gone, by the way. She'd run off somewhere just as soon as she'd introduced me to Ogi. A busy young lady, or maybe she didn't think she should listen to the details of this conversation? Yeah, transferring really must be tough. The entire environment around you changes.
True, but I've grown used to it. Anyway, every time I transfer into a new school, there's something I do right away. What do you think that is?
What do I think? Say hello to the teachers.
I don't always.
Wait, you don't?
Well, I make diagrams like these.
Ogi flipped through the pages of the notebook. I could tell it was new, but a lot of its pages had been filled with diagrams of the school's buildings. She'd depicted Naoatsu High in a fairly detailed way. There weren't just flat layouts, but three-dimensional ones too. How had she drawn a bird's-eye view of the whole school? It almost looked like aerial photography.
You could call it a habit of mine. I want to get a grasp on the school that's going to host me. Do you think that's strange?
No, not really. To be honest, I did think it was pretty eccentric, but I actually knew 2 or so people who'd done something similar when they were starting at Naoatsu. I couldn't call it outright strange. What shocked me more was that those 2 or so people weren't the only ones. I was just meeting Oji for the first time, and she was the niece of that tricky dude Ashino. I'd been cautious approaching her from a distance, so to speak, but I found this bit of odd behavior endearing.
I like mysteries that take place in mansions. Just seeing a blueprint at the beginning of a book gets me interested. That's why every time I start life at a new school, I draw layouts like these. Not that I'm expecting anyone to get murdered.
She laughed, but it was hard to take it entirely as a quip because she somehow seemed so mysterious. If she'd told me that she was drawing a map for when a case did occur, I might have believed her. Huh, let me take a look.
At my panties?
No. At your notebook? It was just the kind of thing that Kanbar's protege would say. The former star's perverted ways were a bit of a secret thanks to the efforts of those who knew her best, so her influence on Oji made me think that the two must be close, though given what she just said. Kanbar instructing her to take off her underwear was just talk. But then, how had Ogi gotten close to Kanbaru in the short time since she'd transferred to our school? Kanbaru did have a habit of making friends with everyone though, and so I flipped through the notebook from cover to cover. Looking at the school that way, I realized how many of its facilities I knew nothing about, despite being a student here for nearly 3 years. It was like I'd been shown just how half-hearted my time at Naotsu High had been. By the way, you're really good at drawing, Ogi. I'm not that good at reading maps, so I'm normally confused by this kind of thing. But your notebook makes me feel like I'm right there walking through the school.
I am most humbly honored by your praise. In that case, I'm sure you understand why I think something's funny.
Like, I didn't understand. I hadn't meant to flatter her, but now my compliment sounded phony. I forced myself to come up with something like an opinion. The fact that there's too many buildings? Given the size of the student body, we could probably do away with one. Or,
That's not it! What are you, a fool?
harsh words, delivered in a polite tone. For a second I thought I'd angered her, but apparently not, as her expression was as beaming as ever did her unique speech ode to transferring from one school to the next. There are cases where a horrible name to call someone in one place is a regular way to address them in others.
That's just because of Japan's declining population. They must have needed this many in the past. We can infer that the large number of empty classrooms is simply the result of the number of current students being lower compared to when the school came into being. That's not what I'm talking about. This right here is.
Where?
Here?
Oji took her notebook back, opened it to a different page, and pointed at the same place she was pointing a few moments earlier. But nothing there struck me as particularly funny.
The layout here is strange.
Fed up with waiting for an answer from a fool, which is to say from me, Ogi began explaining.
Strange! Or maybe... They have rooms here, like they should, right? It's funny that this one room is missing in between them.
Funny. But the third floor does have this room. The AV room. I looked at the layout once again, this time with these preconceptions and prejudices in mind, but still didn't see it.
That's because the layout is wrong. Wrong or, well, I did draw these to reflect reality, but the actual AV room isn't this long. You must have noticed that it's drawn about 1.5 times longer compared to the surrounding rooms.
True, maybe it did look that way compared to the classrooms around it. The AV room I'd used a number of times during my time as a student wasn't this large. It still didn't seem like an impermissibly large error, though, and it wasn't as if Ogi had drawn her plans with the kind of serious measuring tools they used on a construction site. She'd probably overlooked a classroom on one of the floors, or got her units wrong, or made some other kind of error that manifested in the AV room getting a little longer.
What's that? You're not doubting me, are you?
I know you don't like me enough to be wounded by me doubting you.
No, I'm quite enamored with you. I have a thing for easily tricked fools.
Casually calling me a fool again. It'd be one thing if she was contemptuous, the way Senjogahara once was, but given Ogi's smile, I couldn't tell if she was being guileless or malicious.
I don't make mistakes. If this is a mistake, I'll strip down and use my wide open arms in place of a ruler to remedy the entire school.
Are you always so careless about making promises? Me, I'd never promise such a thing, no matter how confident I was.
It isn't a mistake. If this were a mystery novel, a floor plan not lining up with reality would in most cases mean there's a hidden room. Now, what should we do? What if there was enough space here for an entire room stuffed full of treasure?
Hidden treasure at a school? And I doubt it'd become ours just because we found it.
You need to dream a little kid studying for exams turn into such realists.
Even if it wasn't a mistake on your part when you were drawing these, wouldn't it make sense to assume it's a mistake on the builder's part? In other words, it's dead space just buried in concrete? I didn't recall there being any concrete wall next to the AV room, but if you asked me what it did look like, I couldn't tell you. All you really need to know as a student is the location of your homeroom.
Maybe. Of course, that would be best. No, it'd be best if it were stuffed full of treasure, but I'd be fine if it were stuffed full of concrete. But if...
Saying something improper or imprudent seemed to excite Ogi so much that she could barely hold herself back.
If this is some kind of aberrational phenomenon, we ought to look into it before anyone gets hurt.
My honest impression was that she was jumping to conclusions. Yes, it was strange that the layout didn't line up with reality, but you couldn't go straight from that to an aberrational phenomenon. Even her hidden room theory was more believable, though maybe you could find an aberration like that if you dug through the literature. And anyway, Shinobu would notice if there was something like that at our school. In fact, how could Ashino not have caught on as early as spring break? Yeah, he'd definitely say, "I don't like it when people blame everything on aberrations as soon as something strange happens." I couldn't dismiss her opinion out of hand, though, precisely because she was Ashino's niece and because the two or so people who'd surveyed every inch of Naotsuhai when they entered, namely Tsubasa Hanakawa and Hataide Senjogahara, hadn't said a thing about this dead space. If it really existed, whether it had anything to do with aberrations or not, Ogi had spotted something unusual immediately after transferring in, like it was obvious, when not only Tsubasa Hanakawa, who knew everything, and Hataide Senjogahara, at the height of her desperate self-preservation, hadn't. This fact, no, it was only a possibility at this point, but I wasn't so dry that my curiosity wasn't piqued by the possibility. Even if it's an aberration, we don't know that it's harmful, but I suppose I do agree. We should look into it just in case. I said, prudently, and a little too turgidly. I didn't want her to think that I was hopping straight onto an underclassman's proposal. I wanted to keep up the appearances I no longer cared to with Kinbaru.
Ah, that's great. I knew I could count on Araragi-senpai. Please come and meet me today. After school, then. Visiting a third-year classroom makes me nervous, you know.
How cute of her, and unlike Kanbar. She was effectively telling a senior she'd only just met to come to her, which was rude, but I didn't even notice. Okay, I just need to come to your classroom, but this can't go too late, okay? I might get assassinated if someone mistakenly thinks that I'm off having fun after school with one of my juniors.
I won't keep you long. Of course, maybe 15 minutes. That should be more than enough time to realize it's nothing. It'll only take a minute.
Or 15, Ogi said, looking cheery. Seeing her act this way made me think that all the talk about floor plans and aberrations was nothing more than an excuse. Maybe this girl at a brand new school where she didn't know people just wanted to get along with an indirect acquaintance like me. I thought conceitedly, of course, the truth was something else. 15 minutes wasn't anywhere near enough for our investigation, and I still didn't know how long it would take. I went to visit Ogi after school, like I'd said, and from there we briskly walked over to the building where the AV room was located. Ogi took the lead. This made me feel like I was the transfer student, and she was showing me around school. She talked to me about all kinds of things on our way there, so I wouldn't get bored, I assumed. Things like the law in serialized manga, where editors write really long copy for titles they're not confident about. On the other hand, copy for popular manga is short, or the law where the more expensive something gets, the slower it goes. The speed at which food is served at a restaurant, paying the bill, the delivery of goods, wrapping a present. Stuff she came up with herself. It seemed that she was a fan of laws. Seeing her talk on and on made me think there was indeed something about her that took after Mimo Shino. There was also something about it that made her feel like a fresh high school girl. I savored both the nostalgia and the freshness of it as we arrived at our destination. And at our destination, the third floor of the school building in question, next to the AV room, sure enough. There it was, a classroom. See, Ogi? Take a look at that. There's a regular classroom right here. You overlooked it, that's all. In other words, you added the space taken up by this classroom to your drawing of the AV room. Now it's clear that you made a mistake. So I think it's time for you to strip down and use your wide-open arms in place of a ruler to remeasure the entire school. Maybe I'll have you measure my body while you're at it. I feel like I've grown lately. I didn't actually say. After all, it was far stranger for there to be a classroom here than not in a building full of special classrooms. Why was there a regular one like it had sprouted up out of nowhere? It was so out of place that it left an impression, and I absolutely would have remembered it. Even if I didn't remember it looking at a floor plan, I definitely would after seeing it in person.
What could this classroom be? It wasn't here when I visited the area to draw my layout.
Ogi said, flatly, for some reason grinning as always. It almost looked like she was enjoying this. Anyway, let's go inside. It was the wrong decision. It seems obvious that I should have stepped back, come up with a plan, and returned. I should have drawn on Hanakawa's wisdom and consulted Shinobu, who was sleeping in my shadow, but I wanted to show my underclassmen that I was reliable, so I recklessly opened the door and walked inside. Like a fool. From the outside, it seemed like no one was there, but the door was unlocked, making it easy to enter. No one indeed. Just rows of desks and chairs, as well as a teacher's desk and a locker for cleaning supplies. An empty classroom, nothing odd about that. The fact is, the unticking clock in the gym being visible from the windows already stood out, but I had yet to notice. It certainly wasn't stuffed full of treasure, and as far as I could see, it was a plain classroom. Assuming I'd just remembered wrong and that it'd always been right here, I felt relieved, not noticing a single thing I should have. Ogi entered the classroom as well, then closed the door. And that brings us to now. I looked at the clock above the blackboard, then compared it to my wristwatch, noting the disparity between the time my watch displayed and the stop time on the hanging clock. My watch was operating like nothing had happened, so it was possible that the clock on the wall was out of batteries, but Ogi hadn't dismissed that possibility out of hand. If time was stopped inside the classroom, to some degree that explained why the doors wouldn't budge and the windows wouldn't break. A class where time had stopped, or no. Maybe I ought to call it a class where time didn't pass.
I guess the question is how fixed in time it really is.
Ogi said, facing the blackboard again. It wasn't a ballpoint pen in her hands now, but a regular implement for writing on a blackboard, which is to say chalk.
That's right, blackboard chalk, but I'm old-fashioned, so I prefer to call it slate.
With that, she drew a line across the blackboard. While the ballpoint pen had failed to leave a mark on it, this time she managed to draw a clear white line on the board. Whoa. 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 I exclaimed, not so much at the experiment results showing that you could draw on the blackboard with chalk, but at the level of activity with which Ogi performed test after test. Weren't people normally more cautious in a sealed environment like ours?
Looks like chalk works. I wonder what the logic is here. What about this?
Ogi then held the chalk sideways to draw a thick line. It was a forbidden way of using chalk that consumed a piece in the blink of an eye. Still, she could draw that way. Her thick line bent back and forth as she drew a love umbrella. From there, she held the chalk vertically again and wrote Koyomi and Ogi under each side of the umbrella. This really isn't the time for that, Ogi. Oops. If anything, this wasn't the time for me to be getting ticked off by an underclassman's silly joke. I should have been coming up with my own experiments, my own trials and errors to figure out how to escape from the locked room. Will the lights turn on? We hadn't tried the switches yet since there was more than enough light coming through the window, but I tried flicking them all on. All of them at the same time, in our situation, showed how slovenly I am, but the fluorescent tubes on the ceiling lit up anyway. So there's electricity. I guess this place functions as a classroom at least. I wasn't sure. Still, if it was getting electricity, then as a last-ditch escape method we could use an outlet to light a spark and cause a fire. Tsukihi had done something similar in the past to help Karen, quite literally the Fire Sisters, but while it was probably safer than an explosion, we ran the risk of suffocating if we started a fire in an enclosed space, making it an honest-to-goodness last-ditch method. Is there a danger of us suffocating even if we didn't? I wonder how fast a human being consumes oxygen. We'd run out eventually if this goes on for too long.
I don't know about that one. This is a classroom. After all, it might be a locked room, but I doubt we're sealed off from even the atmosphere. Maybe if someone used tape to trap us in here, but enough air should be seeping through the window frames and all to keep two humans alive.
Oh, that's a relief. Though I said I was relieved, I noticed that Ogi had used the words locked room. She probably just happened to choose them, of course, but maybe she was right. Locked room might be a more fitting term for our situation than enclosed space if we weren't in an airtight environment. Sheesh. Guided by a blueprint to a hidden room like something out of a mystery novel, we now found ourselves in a locked room. Not a bad setup, but it had a lamentable lack of a detective.
What do you think, Araragi-senpai?
What do I think? Well, what am I supposed to? I had to admit that a floor plan that didn't seem quite right and my inability to recall the classroom could be put down to some misunderstanding, but there was no logical explanation for ending up in a locked room. My only choice was to explain it illogically, as an absurdity. But Ogi, if an aberration is doing this, what kind of aberration is it? Is there some aberration that locks people in a classroom?
Hard to say. Unlike my uncle, I'm not versed in that old-timey lore. I only know major aberrations, the kinds that show up in manga and movies.
She either played dumb or acted modest with such unfathomable snickering that it made me think she actually did know. It was the same when I talked to Ashino. I couldn't help but distrust him. Seeing my suspicious eyes on her, Ogi continued.
But I'm sure there has to be some kind of aberration that keeps you from leaving a locked room. The type you hear about most doesn't let you leave until the next visitor shows up and you trick them into walking in so that you can leave. That sort of thing.
Yes, I'd heard that kind of ghost story. So were we stuck in this classroom until someone else showed up? No, that couldn't be right. It wasn't as if anyone trapped inside had left when we walked in. Even if this was an aberration, it was a different type of phenomenon.
I was so afraid a fool like you might go along with that hypothesis.
Ogi smiled gently. She was cutest whenever she called me a fool. But what was it? I kept missing my chance to scold her.
I can say this much, though. For every aberration, there is a reason you see.
Wasn't that another one of Oshino's lines? In which case, the inference was that figuring this reason out would help us escape subjape. Still, why'd we be unable to leave a classroom? And why should a clock stop the way?
Maybe the time its hands stopped on is the key. I mean, doesn't the ridiculous time they've stopped on feel...
The clock hanging on the wall read a little before 6:58 to be exact. As for my wristwatch, it said 4:45. Ogi and I must have started our investigation at around 3:30, so an hour and 15 minutes had already passed since the onset of our abnormal situation. Even if that clock stopping a little before 6 is the key, is that supposed to be AM or PM? You can't tell with an analog clock.
I think it's PM judging from the view outside.
Wait, really? If anything, referencing the scene beyond the windows hadn't occurred to me. While I was quietly impressed by Ogi, I didn't want to betray my lack of insight to an underclassman, forcing me to find faults in her argument. I keenly hated how small of a person I was. Wouldn't it be darker out if it was 6 in the evening? At this time of the year, you might not know this because you're a transfer student, Ogi, but the sun around here sets pretty early once it's October.
It does. Ha! I learned so much from talking to you. I still think it's 6 p.m., though look at the direction of the shadow cast by the gym. The sun would have to be in the west for it to look that way.
Okay, but we're facing... Wait, no. We shouldn't base our direction off of this building's position since we're seeing the wrong thing from the window. We ought to use the gym's position instead, I muttered, recalling Ogi's gym page fine. In that case, yes, the clock was showing 5:58 p.m. 6 in the evening is when school closes for the day, right? So we'll be able to leave in time-o, or maybe it's still 3:30 outside, if the clock is stopped?
That would mean my wristwatch is malfunctioning here. This is getting annoying. What you talking about? Time travel is a walk in the park for you.
Hold on, she shouldn't know anything about the time travel stuff. It happened after Ashino left town.
Details aside, we sure in a bind, aren't we? If time isn't moving forward, that means night is never going to come. In other words, you won't be able to rely on that night walker, Nes Shinobu.
Oh, I guess not. Shinobu Ashino, the vampire who lives in my shadow, formerly known as the Aberration Slayer, is like a natural predator to any and all aberrational phenomena, an aberration who eats other aberrations. If she could make an appearance, she'd surely consume whatever we were facing, maybe even the whole classroom. But it was quite a lot of work luring out someone nocturnal, like her at the awkward hour of just before 6 in the evening. It wasn't impossible, but there was no telling how many donuts she'd demand in return. I don't know. Even if time isn't flowing in this classroom, it's moving for me, so maybe it is inside my shadow for Shinobu too.
We don't know for sure if time is flowing for you. It could be that only your will is active, while time has stopped for your body. I hope that our physiologies aren't moving through time.
Why not?
What are we going to do if we want to pee?
A serious problem indeed. I was doing my best not to think about it, but more than hunger or thirst, that was the most pressing issue, if anything. Though, Ogi kept calm as she said this.
I've heard all about your heroics, but even if you're known as our era's Junichiro Tenizaki, you couldn't possibly be into watching a girl pee and vice versa.
Who are you calling our era's Tanizaki?
If time really has stopped in this classroom right before 6, why would that be?
Asked Ogi, putting us back on track. What do you mean? Why?
Let me rephrase that. 6 in the evening, time to leave school. What meaning does this phenomenon hold, where 2 students are trapped in a classroom at the exact time when they ought to be leaving?
Not going home, even when it's time to... She was right. It did seem odd, in fact. As far as school-related aberrations go, the type meant to teach some sort of lesson was the most common, like attacking students who loiter on the premises.
Is this what you'd call detention?
Detention. Why was I getting hung up on that word? The reason wasn't coming to me, but I got the vague sense that it meant something. It felt like it stirred my memories to tension.
Have you ever had to stay after school for some remedial session? Araragi senpai. Haha! I can't say I have. You might be surprised to know, but I'm on the smarter side.
Can't say I have, either. Though Obi acted impressed, it wasn't smarts that kept me from doing detention or remedial work. I'd just skip any. Not that I could now, since I was hoping to take college entrance exams. But yes, last year or the year before that, especially when I was a first year.
What's the matter? Your fate doesn't look well. I mean, your face.
Really? Sorry, I was just feeling dizzy.
No need to apologize. No need at all. Being burdened with a helpless underclassman must be taxing. Would you like to sit down on one of those chairs? I'm sure you're not a germaphobe like me, but if you insist, I can lend you my lap.
Where exactly on your lent lap would I sit? If I borrowed it when you're not sitting, that would be a gymnastic formation. Seriously. I was starting to get used to Ogi's teasing. As her senior, I should have been putting her in her place, right before it was too late, as with Kanbara, but I honestly did feel dizzy with a slight headache. I took Ogi's suggestion and decided to sit down for a moment, not on her lap, of course, but in one of the classroom's many chairs. I could see this going for a long time, so there was no point in overexerting myself now. I moved, pulled out a chair, and sat in it.
Why did you sit there?
She asked as soon as I did, or maybe even a little before I did. Huh? What? Why? She was the one who'd suggested it.
No, that's not what I mean. This classroom is full of chairs, so I wanted to know why you picked that one.
Why'd there be a reason? I just felt like it. I thought of saying, but now that she'd asked, I couldn't figure out the answer. If I was sitting down because I was tired, it made the most sense to pick the closest chair. So why get moving, win my way through the desks, pass up a number of other chairs, and finally sit in the 4th seat from the front, 3rd from the right? I just felt like it was, of course, the only answer I could give.
Felt like it. You just felt like that was the easiest chair to sit in. It looked the most comfortable.
I don't think there's much difference in how comfortable any of these chairs are. It's just...
Just what?
like I felt used to sitting here. I myself thought that was an odd thing to say. Stumped as I was for an answer, used to in a room I was visiting for the first time? Sure, if I need to rest in our classroom even though all of the chairs are basically the same, I might unconsciously pick the most familiar seat, my own, to sit in, but this wasn't even close to being our classroom.
Is that really true?
Huh? What? What'd you just say, Ogi?
Oh, I'm just throwing every possibility at the wall, and I just realized that maybe this isn't the first time you've come here. When you needed to take a seat, could you have gone straight to a specific chair because you've sat in it before?
Sorry, that one's too out there for me. I replied with a half smile. Yeah, that didn't seem like a hypothesis worth serious consideration. Ogi was playing around and teasing me again. I didn't even know there was a classroom here until now.
It wasn't here when I did my first survey either, but it appeared when I came with you, so it strikes me as completely natural that it has something to do with you.
Hmm? Is that what it means? To be honest, I wondered if Ogi wasn't the cause since she had discovered the aberrational phenomenon, but from her perspective, I was the suspicious one.
You even said it yourself, Araragi-senpai. The view out of the window seemed familiar to you.
Huh? Did I?
You did! Right when we entered before we noticed we were trapped.
I didn't remember this, but I must have if she was so certain. I must have forgotten once I realized I was in a locked room. Still seated, I took another look out the window, where I could see the gym. At our angle from this floor of this building, we shouldn't have been able to, and the view from my seat was a little different from the one by the window. I couldn't see the roof anymore, and instead mountains loomed off in the distance, and it did seem, my memories, they were being stirred. I remember seeing this. But, echoed Ogi, more cross-examining than following up. She'd gotten close to my seat without my noticing. She hadn't made a sound, and she was so close that I found myself a little flustered. I started to talk, as if to gloss over the situation. Well, I wouldn't say I feel particularly nostalgic. Actually, it's kind of unpleasant.
Unpleasant, really? I think it's a nice view, this location, this situation. We were saying that despite being on the 3rd floor, it felt more like the 4th or 5th floor, but it's definitely the 5th at this height.
5th floor. 5th floor in which case? Right. I needed to rethink this. The view was an impossibility from this floor of this building. What if this was the 5th floor? And I was in a classroom in a building that faced the gym. What if I was where I could see this? I was familiar with such a classroom. Fukado. Araragi.
Oh, what's the matter? It's not like something came to you. Sorry if I was insensitive.
Ogi said like she was apologizing. No, she wasn't apologizing, she was savoring this. She changed positions again, at some point, and now stood directly behind me.
Did you just recall something you didn't want to recall?
No, that's not it. I haven't recalled anything. Indeed I hadn't, because I'd never forgotten it to begin with. How could I ever forget what happened? I bit my lips, went silent, and stuck my hand inside the desk, to search inside the seat I chose, claiming it was comfortable. The owner had to be pretty averse to studying at home. It was crammed with textbooks. I pulled one out and examined its back cover. There it said, Year 1, Class 3-Araragi. Gah. I covered my mouth and instantly moved to hide the name, but was too late. Ogi spotted it from over my shoulder.
Wait a sec, did that textbook just now say Araragi on it? That's funny, that's strange. Why could that be? Why would your textbook be here in this classroom? Did you slip it in while I wasn't looking? Please, don't you know outside items aren't allowed in this classroom?
Just kidding. It's not like this is a test. There's no such rule, Ogi added slimily somehow, without ditching her easy tone. A test. That's right, a test. Each word she uttered stirred my memories and stung them, not like a rose's thorns, but like a porcupine's quills. Ogi, what do you know?
Nothing, you're the one. Who knows? For example...
Ogi reached for the seat next to mine. From the desk, she extracted a random textbook, then flipped it over and read the name on it. Year 1, Class 3, Toshima.
You must know this Toshima person too?
I did. Susan Toshima. Everyone called her Swai for short was. She in the flower arrangement club. She was always laughing and smiling, no matter what you asked her or said to her. Didn't her friends always caution her that laughing with her mouth wide open wasn't ladylike? If anything, though, the boys liked her for her hearty laughter. The teachers did too. Hadn't she been like a savior, in fact, for teachers who liked to joke during class? Right, and she was so serious about seat reassignments and seemed pretty unhappy in this 1/4 from the front, 2nd from the right, a half-assed position. Sitting right next to someone who looked so dissatisfied was bewildering at first, but then I came to realize it was a special front row seat for hearing her laughter. She wore her hair in French braids. I knew just how long it took to do that because my little sister is like a walking hair catalog, and I always thought about the amount of work it must take her every morning. I never brought it up, though.
You sure do know a lot about this, Miss Toshima.
No. Any classmate would know that much. I hadn't known anything after all. This was back when I hadn't. There were a lot of things I hadn't known.
Then what about Fukado. What kind of person sat at the desk I flipped over?
It seemed that Ogi, too, had seen the name on that textbook. So she had, but not brought it up until now. Well, that wasn't odd. It's not as if the name had anything to do with her. Shimono Fukado. No, her. I was scared of, not because she did anything in particular. I think she was harmless. I guess she was just ridiculously good at putting forth a personality. To be blunt, she acted cute. She came to school wearing the kinds of fancy hair accessories you only ever see in anime. She'd get told not to all the time, and she'd get this look on her face like, I don't understand why you're so mad at me. It was obvious that she knew maybe because she thought that being smart or a good student wasn't cute. She'd do badly on tests on purpose. I won't say she played dumb, but it was kind of like that. I think her goal for the future was becoming a mom. Even an oaf like me could easily tell that becoming a bride was the more girlish answer, so maybe she meant it. But when she smiled, her eyes never did, as far as I know. Damn. I was talking too much. I couldn't stop once I'd started, though. It was like the floodgates had opened and the words were spilling forth. Hadn't I decided not to think about it anymore, even if I couldn't forget it? I'd thought I'd decided. Why? Why was year 1, class 3 - my classroom from 2 years earlier, here now? Just before 6, 5:58 p.m., right before it was time to go home. We needed to go home, but couldn't. This classroom, that no one could leave. Ogi, is there anything around that might tell us the date?
The date?
Yeah, like what today or no, what month and day it is in this classroom. I need to know.
Well, it's right there on the blackboard. Just take a look.
Ogi was directly behind me now for the 3rd time. Drawing her face close to mine, she put her arm around my shoulder and pointed at the blackboard. At its right-hand corner. Why hadn't I noticed until now? Today's date in this classroom was right there along with the names of those who were on day duty. July 15th, Thursday, Marizumi.
Oh, so today's July 15th. Now, it makes sense for it to be so bright outside. So then, did something happen in this classroom year 1? Class 3, I suppose at around 6. Something regretful, I'm sure, and that regret must have borne fruit as this aberration.
Remarked Ogi, broadly, as if none of it really mattered. I almost found myself protesting and saying it was more serious than that. But I couldn't. The biggest reason being that I didn't want to yell at a girl who was my underclassman, but also she was completely on the mark when I thought about it. What happened in this classroom on that day really didn't matter, which is exactly why it was so unbearable. Who knew what the space was being used for now? An after-school class council meeting held on July 15th in the year 1, class 3 room, located in the center of the 5th floor of that building facing the gym. A gathering of the class council that might be termed a trial. There we condemned one another over a certain incident, asserting our own innocence and imputing guilt to others. There were objections, and there was the right to remain silent. There were testimonies, and there was perjury. And I, Koyomi Araragi, of year 1, class 3, sat at the center of this tumultuous trial. Right. Wasn't that when it started? When I first started to say it?
I don't make friends making friends would lower my intensity as a human.
Ogi preempted as if to block my escape route, to chase me down a dead end. Her face, still to the side of mine, drew even closer. Our cheeks almost touched now. She wasn't just close, her dainty chin was resting on top of my shoulder.
That was your favorite line, though. It seems you've stopped saying it ever since Tsubasa Hanekawa came into your life. We really do change through meeting people, don't we? So let me ask this, out of curiosity. How did you change when you were in this class? How did Fukado? How did Doishima? How did Kuma? How did Marizumi change you?
Change Min.
I've heard your personality changed quite a bit between middle school and high school. Could the reason for that possibly be found in this classroom?
Who told her that? Well, some people did know, of course, but this was the past, and the only ones who'd bother digging it up now were the Fire Sisters.
What happened, Araragi-senpai? Here in this classroom, that day, that time.
Ogi whispered the words like she was cornering me. One of her arms was around my neck, and I felt like I was being throttled and understood what people meant when they spoke of being hanged with a silk noose.
Let's talk about it, Koyomi Aragi. You'll feel better once you do. No matter how awful a memory might be, talk about it and it'll turn into nothing more than a tale.
A tale?
Don't worry, I'll listen. I might not look it, but I'm someone you can really talk to.
I did everything to maintain my composure, even then. Even under those circumstances, I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of my junior. How vain am I? We can't leave.
Excuse me?
We can't leave. We aren't allowed to exit this classroom until we figure out the culprit. That's what we did. That's what we forced upon ourselves in that class council. And as unbelievable as this sounds, I was the chairman. If you were to ask me what kind of person Koyomi Araragi was during his first year of high school, I guess a self-evaluation finds someone less difficult than I am now, while a self-examination finds someone more honest and straightforward than I am now. I also hadn't been attacked by a vampire, of course, so I could state with confidence that I was a human day and night. Now then. Naoitsu Private High School, which I attend and which Ogi transferred into, is quite the prep school. We even have classes on Saturdays, and it'd be hard to call it an average high school in that sense. The exam to get in is fairly hard too. Maybe it was a miracle that I overcame this barrier. No, miracle might be going too far. It'd be more accurate to say that I passed thanks to some sort of mistake. I mean, I had to pay a pretty high price to compensate for the mistake of doing whatever it took to get in. It wasn't long before I couldn't keep up with Naoitsu High's over-the-top curriculum. From the time you're a freshman, you're in classes that are preparing you for college entrance exams. No fun allowed, and that was a pretty big culture shock for me. Still, I'd gotten in due to some sort of mistake or not, and in those days I thought I should accept my fate and stick it out. Yes, until the end of our first term, right before summer break. Until just after finals, I guess I should say. Well, whatever the case, until what happened after school on July 15th. July 15th. The day I gave up on being serious, on being an honest and straightforward student, and decided to sink to being what Tsubasa Hanakawa would call a delinquent. The truth is, I just became your standard washout. Even if that day and its events never happened, I'd have fallen behind before long. In any case, on July 15th, 2 years ago, I finished ignoring my incomprehensible classes. I wasn't even trying to keep up. I mean, I was leaving my textbooks at school, and, mentally exhausted, was getting ready to make my way home. It's almost summer break. It's almost summer break. It's almost summer break. I chanted in my mind. Like a spell, not that summer break boded well, considering how much homework we'd be getting. I'd somehow survived our first term, but couldn't stand the thought of going on that way until graduation. In fact, I hadn't made it through first term yet, and in the end wouldn't. Shadows. 3 of them blocked my path as I walked down the hallway. Feeling drained, barely noticing them in time, I almost collided with them.
Araragi.
A voice called. When I finally lifted my downturned eyes, I saw 3 of my classmates.
Got a second?
It was Arikure who said this as I stood there by Arikure. A mean girl who seemed to find a way to complain about everything, to be honest. A type I don't really like, and I doubt any boys had a favorable view of her. She always had her hands in her skirt pockets, and it wasn't some blatant attempt to act bad. It was to protect her hands. When she did take them out, they were gloved, still fully protected. Something about her wanting to become a pianist, good thing you can't hear her personality, you might badmouth her, but apparently she was reasonably accomplished. Not that I'd ever heard her play, but rumors aren't always just rumors. In any case, getting stopped by a girl I didn't like when I felt so drained was pretty rough. Sorry, there's something important I have to do now, called going home.
What, you think you're better than me?
She said as if to pick a fight. I didn't think I was, but she must have thought I was messing with her. That's one part of me that continues to stay the same. 2 girls stood behind Arikure, whose nickname I believe was Arakui, or Anteater, and one of them, Kijikiri, was silent. In fact, spaced out somehow, she wouldn't even look at me. That's the kind of person she was, proceeding at her own pace, or maybe laid back. Sometimes she'd stay behind for no reason, and come to think of it, even be absent without telling anyone. Hoka Kijikiri was a capricious girl with a strange way of life. People even said she lived in a different world. That's why I was surprised. Why would she team up with Arikure to block my path? Not that she'd strayed from her indifferent stance, just standing there and looking away. No, I really do have to get home. I have an obligation to. Going home is one of my 3 grade obligations. I haven't told anyone else, but my little sister in 6th grade got herself mixed up in a huge fight, or actually stirred up a huge fight, and I can't afford to take my eyes off of her.
Huh? Stop with the jokes already. I hate that kind of stuff more than anything.
Arikura complained like I truly offended her. It wasn't a joke, but to be fair, my beloved little sisters had yet to be known as the Fire Sisters of Suganoki, 2nd middle school. My words must have come off as nothing more than a lie.
Now. Calm down.
said the last girl tone to soothe her, as if she were a wild mare.
We're sorry to bother you when you're busy, but please come back to the classroom with us. We won't take that much of your time. You'd be a great help.
Won't take that much of your time. Those words ended up being a lie, but I'm sure she didn't mean to deceive me. GQ tone. Her nickname was Icing, not the frozen kind, but after the character for sugar in her name. Stay with me, but year 1 class 3 also had a boy, Higuma, with the character for ice. She always looked happy, infectiously so. The healing type, to use a once fashionable term. Her name and nickname suggested that she liked sweets, but she was an all-round glutton. While she never seemed unhappy, according to herself, she was happiest when she was eating. A regular customer at all-you-can-eat buffets. I knew the basics about each girl, having studied hard alongside them for an entire term, but wasn't aware that they operated as a group. Actually, I think this was the first time I'd seen them together. As I wondered what could have brought them together, Araragi ran out of patience.
You're being so irritating, Araragi. Are you coming or not? Decide already. It's fine with me if you don't.
I will. That's all you want, right? If I were a little wiser, I probably wouldn't have agreed. I did sense the menacing mood. I had yet to give up on my life as a high school student, though. Why these three? I wondered, but looking back on it, what a good team they made. The the aggressive Araragi in front, Kijikuri behind her, untouchable or simply hard to communicate with. The healing tone, a lineup you'd rather not face in a fight. Handling them the wrong way could hobble the rest of my high school days. I ended up crippling most of my future as a high schooler anyway, but my only option at the time was to go with them. We returned to the classroom, year 1 class 3, on the 5th floor of the school building facing the gym. 2 students stood by the door, waiting for us, and that's when it all made sense. 1 boy and 1 girl, and the boy wasn't the problem here. The issue was the girl glaring at me with open hostility, a sharp stare as if her parents' murderer stood behind me. Her name was Sodachi Oikura. While she wanted people to call her Oiler, they actually called her How Much. This was of course because her name Oikura could also be read as How Much, which was quite fitting for someone who looked at you so appraisingly. Not that we were on good enough terms to call each other by any nicknames. If anything, I was her enemy. She was the class president. These days that could only refer to Tsubasa Hanakawa, globally speaking, at least for me, but her reputation had yet to spread so far. Hence, Class President Oikura, what are you doing here? Are you the one who asked for me?
Hurry up and go inside. Everyone's waiting for you.
She replied coldly, and entered the classroom. The boy with her followed behind. If you're curious, this was Tuma Shui, our class vice president. If you took dead seriousness and molded it into a high school freshman, the model Natsu high pupil, you'd get him. I touched on how Oikura was with me, but she was harsh overall, and I personally saw him as more of a class president than her. According to him though, he was more of the bureaucratic type who preferred to play a supporting role. What kind of high schooler is the bureaucratic type? I thought and didn't believe him at first, but he stayed in Oikura's shadow during that entire first term, helping her lead the class, so I guess that sort of talent exists. I did see him just once at an arcade, where he moved with incredible precision for a dancing game. I felt like I'd seen a side of him I shouldn't have, but ever since I couldn't hate him even if he wasn't the type I got along with. I carefully avoided any conflict with Oikura, partly for his sake, but I bet he barely noticed me.
You heard her, Araragi? She said to come in.
I shrugged and entered the classroom as I was told. Oikura never answered the question, but she must have asked the trio to fetch me instead of doing so herself. Why? Because we would have gotten in a fight and she wanted to maintain her dignity. In any case, it made perfect sense if she was the mind behind the well-selected team. What gave me pause though, were her words, "Everyone's waiting for you." What did that mean? Was I the kind of hero who could make everyone eagerly await me? Who was everyone in the first place? I went in and learned that everyone was quite literal. Everyone was a member of Year 1. Class 3 was assembled there.
Ha! Everyone, so the full class. It's abandoned now, but every seat was filled back then. I see.
Yeah, wait, it's only been 2 years, not 10, and technically, the seats belonging to the trio who'd come for me were empty. Also, the class vice president Shui was sitting, but Oikura was standing at the teacher's desk.
On top of it?
She wasn't that eccentric a class president, okay? Anyway, standing at the desk, she declared, "Now that we've secured our deserter, I'd like to begin the special session of our class council."
Deserter? How harsh. Miss Okura must have been pretty scary. I'd never poke fun at her. She's still here as a 3rd year, right?
Yeah, I guess. I tried to keep it vague because I really didn't want to discuss it. I put us right back on track, taking us back to the past. A special session of the class council isn't normally something you do after school, but Ikura was charismatic enough to make it happen.
Still, it's weird. You didn't know about this meeting until just before it happened. That must be why they sent someone to get you and why they called you a deserter. Why didn't you know about it?
A simple lapse in communication, apparently. The message reached the rest of the class, whether by folded notes or text message or whatever, but it never made it to me.
What? Sounds like...
Excuse me, could you not be so quick to call people wannabe radio shows?
Don't mishear people in ways that expose your dated ideas about tech. Anyway, you didn't have any friends even before you started saying stupid things like making friends would lower my intensity as a human.
You're somewhat mistaken. Though not completely mistaken, this is a tale about how someone who had no friends came to need no friends.
Exactly what an outcast say. It's a sad thing to have no friends.
I don't need you to preach at me.
Then... All right, now sit up straight and tell me what happened. This so-called special session of the class council. What was its business for today?
We're gathered here today to find the culprit. Understand that no one will be allowed out of this classroom until we find the culprit, or the culprit comes forward.
Her tone was harsh, even I'd rarely heard her speak that way, and she considered me an enemy. Her voice told you she'd accept no counter-argument. She had no intention of coming to a compromise, and to be frank, this soured the mood inside the classroom. The air was the very picture of hostility, though I guess you can't illustrate air.
This is a secret meeting of the class council. No outsiders allowed. Please turn off your cell phones and participate once you have cut off all external communication. Araragi, what are you doing? Close the door. Can you not even close the door?
I thought she was going to suggest that I sit, but was scolded instead for leaving the door open. I felt like bitching. It wasn't as if leaving the door open would cause any problems, but maybe she was expressing her determination not to let anyone out. Then I noticed that all the windows were shut too. This was summer, and locking down a classroom with no air conditioning was a pretty rough thing to do to yourself. Was she trying to create the most inhospitable environment possible? Did she think that she might get lucky and induce the culprit to come forward? And wait, what was this stuff about a culprit? Could she be talking about a mystery novel? No, that wasn't something you'd gather everyone to discuss after school, was it? I took a look at the seat farthest to the back on the gym side 6 rows behind Fukado's. It belonged to Hitagi Senju, the fragile-looking most beautiful girl in class whom I'd been too frightened to speak to, who seemed somehow noble and extremely sickly, like the heroine in a piece of sanatorium literature, who in fact skipped school all the time. It felt like she'd been absent for more than half of first term. If she was in attendance, it had to be pretty serious. Someone could suffer heat stroke in a classroom as hot as ours, especially the sickly Senju. President Ikura, what do you mean, find the culprit?
Shut up! Please, just don't talk! I'm about to explain. I'm following a plan.
Scolded. Sternly too. Even if you asked her weight, no normal girl would answer in such a tone. I fell silent. What else was I going to do in response to her request? But let me tell you, I didn't recall doing anything to her that merited such hatred. Most of the hostility she directed at me was unearned. While I fell silent, hoping not to trouble the vice president by daring to ask another question. Come on, Oikura. What are you talking about? Why do you get to run this? You're one of the suspects too, in fact. Aren't you the prime suspect? Everyone's just too scared to say it. The air grew even more tense. Normally, Koma's voice was too gorgeous to have this effect on anyone, no matter how harsh the words, but even his angel's voice couldn't gloss over or cover up the nerve-wracking content here. I didn't understand what was going on, but I guess he decided to say what everyone was thinking and hit a sore spot. Few others in our class could do this. Certainly not me, especially when I didn't understand the situation, though it seemed I was the only one in the dark. Had it been explained to everyone while I was on my way? That would suck. Did they lasso me in here and leave me out of the loop at the same time?
Yes, Koma, I understand that. Thank you for fulfilling your role as a student on day duty and voicing your honest opinion.
Compared to the way she spoke to me, she was polite with him for some reason. In fact, I was the only boy she was rude to as far as I knew. Why the special treatment? I wished I could tell her to stop, but of course I didn't.
I'm only here in this position provisionally as we begin this session. I'll be handing it over and stepping down once I do, however, as a concerned party, and especially, as you point out, as the most likely suspect, I thought it'd be appropriate for me to give an overview of the situation. I know you're eager to get to cram school, but please, would you zip your mouth up for just a little longer?
Koma muttered in lieu of a response, but went quiet, seemingly annoyed that she brought up his cram school attendance. He was an unusual case, a student who'd applied to Naoitsu High as a backup. Since he was here, he'd failed to get into his first choice, making it a bit hard for him to blend into our class. In fact, his conceited attitude reflected this, and also helped him speak out against Oikura without fear. But even he couldn't make the class president back down. There's nothing wrong with a first year attending cram school. At Naoitsu High, it's deemed praiseworthy. But then again, everyone has his own complexes.
We got off track thanks to Araragi and Koma, but allow me to explain once more since not everyone seems to understand the situation. The incident occurred last Wednesday. All of you recall the open sign-ups for the study sessions to be held in this classroom, correct?
I didn't. In fact, I knew nothing about it. When were their sign-ups? They were doing something without telling me? A study session, last Wednesday, meaning right before finals to prepare for our tests? Then
Raise your hand if you took part in the study session.
half the class did. Their hands came down too fast for me to count, but there'd been more than 15 a session of a decent size. Of course, that also meant that about half of the class, myself included, had skipped it. Koma, who'd just spoken up, hadn't raised his hand, for example.
Yes, and of course I did too.
I didn't see why this was supposed to be obvious. Because she would have organized the event, as a matter of course. Because raising your hand was an unladylike pose. Whatever the reason, I found it unpleasant. She was implicitly blaming anyone who hadn't participated. You uncooperative, selfish bunch. She seemed to be saying, true, I at least was guilty as charged.
For anyone who was absent, the session was primarily for the purpose of studying mathematics.
Putting aside the fact that not participating in a voluntary session had suddenly turned into an absence. Yes, we had 2 tests the next day, Thursday math, as well as health and physical education. Health and P first period, then math second period. Thus, the study session had been limited to math. No one would group up to study health and physical education.
It was a truly wonderful session where we learned from one another concepts we didn't understand, teaching and furthering each other. I'm very proud to have been able to hold such an event. However, something occurred that cast a shadow on this auspicious event, which is why I've gathered you all here today. I believe it's our duty as Naoitsu High students to gather at such times to deal with such situations.
Maybe I'm too stupid to understand, Oikura, but if this is a problem that occurred at the study session, shouldn't the students at the study session work it out themselves? I didn't even know there was a study session.
I had an ally. Not that Hayamachi's psycho. Hayamachi saw me as anything close to an ally.
Miss Hayamachi, first of all, please retract your statement. I'm too stupid to understand. It's offensive to the rest of the class.
Offensive because Hayamachi was something of a genius. Despite her appearance, not the politest thing to say, but that's how students at Naoitsu High see any classmate who comes to school with painted nails, more than light makeup and hair dyed brown. Actually, she was more of the hard-working type than a genius, but in terms of how unpleasant Oikura found her, she must have been right next to Koma, in addition to their physical positions, in other words. That said, Oikura didn't seem to hate her as much as me. The class president didn't just find me unpleasant, but offensive.
Well, I only said I was stupid, because I am stupid.
The problem is what happened after our math tests were returned. Every one of you conscientious students who participated in the study session got a good score, a wonderful thing. But that's where a problem arose. No, let's call it a suspicion, not a problem. A suspicion arose.
Suspicion? Oikura glared at me. Unconscientious students weren't even allowed to mutter a word in reaction, it seemed. I noticed Tetsujo looking at me with sympathy in her eyes. Komichi Tetsujo, member of the softball team. If Oikura was the leader of our class, she was the mediator. Given her personality, she was concerned about the friction between me and Oikura. But at the moment, meeker than usual, she wasn't speaking up. Was a sympathetic look the most she could do for me here? Sorry, but it meant nothing. Though maybe it beat jumping in and starting a heated argument with the class president, not that there could ever be one between the sharp-tongued Oikura and the above-the-fray Tetsujo.
To put it Finally, the suspicion is a suspicion of cheating. Compared to those who were absent from the study session, the test scores of the students who did participate were too high. There is a gap of about 20 points on average between students who participated and those who were absent. A 10 or so point difference could be credited to a study session, but a 20-point difference is too significant to ignore. Some form of foul play must have occurred.
Foul play cheating. So, finding the culprit was about figuring out who cheated weight, but in this case,
Hold on, is that what you call cheating? I thought cheating was like taking a peek at someone's answers during a test.
You're right.
sure enough, Oikura stayed calm. Wait, had Mibi attended the study session? I hadn't paid too much attention when everyone raised their hands, so I couldn't be sure.
My suspicion is that the foul play took the following form. A certain someone acquired the test questions from the teacher's room, then quietly introduced their contents into the study session. As a result, all of the students who participated got higher scores.
Huh? But why do you want to do that? Test questions. If you got them unfairly, why not keep them to yourself? Teaching everyone in the session would be like,
I can think of a number of reasons why someone would do that and cannot pick just one. Camouflage, perhaps. Or it might have been for the thrill of it. In any case, it'd be unforgivable if someone did indeed sully our sacred study session, along with our inviolable final exam, and I don't want any of you who were absent to assume this has nothing to do with you either. This is a problem for all of Year 1, Class 3. To repeat myself,
For some reason, Sodachi Oikura glared at me as she continued like it was a declaration of war.
Understand that no one will be allowed out of this classroom until we find the culprit or the culprit comes forward. We started off looking for a hidden room from a blueprint, got ourselves into a locked room, and now we're trying to identify the perp? It's really getting to seem like we're in a mystery novel. What an interesting story, both exciting and eccentric.
There's nothing interesting about it. I'm sure you can guess how things turned out when a bunch of amateurs got together to finger a culprit. I shook my head at Oji's optimism. I'd barely started telling the story, and I already felt pretty depressed. Why I was sharing all this with a girl I'd met for the first time. I hadn't even told Shinobu.
Still, she sounds quite stern, this old Ikura, sorry, Ikura.
Old Ikura? Funny mistake to make. Should have said that one to her face. Not that I had anything close to the courage to do so back then. I'd been afraid of her for real. There's something extra frightening about people who are incomprehensibly hostile to you. Of course, I'd yet to learn that her brand of sternness was cute compared to Senjo Gahara, who had malice in her heart, not hostility.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but you just reminded me. You referred to a Senjo Gohara in your story. But am I right to assume that's the same Senjo Gohara, who's now your girlfriend? The witch with a poison tongue, the Sundera queen, Senjo Gohara.
What kinds of stories have you heard about her? But, yeah, you're right. She'd had a change of heart and was reformed, but the fact that the girl then known as a flower in a bell jar, really a rose that was all thorns, the heroine in a piece of sanatorium literature, really the monster in a horror novel, and a cloistered princess, really an animal that needed to be caged, is my girlfriend 2 years later just goes to show that relationships worked in the strangest ways. That said, no other classmate from back then is still on good terms with me. I didn't know her true identity at the time, so let's just say she used to be the sickly, cloistered princess.
Well, then, sure, let's both say it.
I guess she was a good listener. Or, at least she genuinely seemed to be relishing my story. There was nothing pleasant about telling it, but I couldn't stop while she acted this way. It's weird, but it felt like my mouth had a mind of its own and spoke independent of me. Where was I again?
The part where Ikura declared no one would be leaving the classroom until the culprit was exposed. Was it to you that she ceded the position of chair? You said you presided over a class council meeting.
Oh, right, that's where I took over.
I see. So basically, she was the Karioya, and you became the actual dealer once she rolled the dice.
A mahjong metaphor only makes things harder to understand. Ogi apparently had some very mature hobbies. Maybe she knew how to play Hanafuda too.
fine. No one literally rolled dice. She decided of her own will to name you chair. Didn't she, the dirt of letting you sit?
Yup, that's it. Even if I didn't see the need to keep me standing the whole time.
I don't get it in that case. Why pick you? Didn't anyone protest?
It's not like everyone was in favor of it, of course, like this one boy, Shinaniwa. Ayazu Shinaniwa, who was like elitism personified. He had a habit of looking down on people, and guys like me were as far down as he could look. He was pretty adamantly against it.
All kinds of people hate you, huh? An elitist? It does seem like there are lots of those in this school. Maybe that's where Ikura's harshness was coming from. But don't worry, Araragi senpai, being hated is a virtue.
Put a little more thought into it when you praise people. I almost agreed with you for a second, but no, of course being hated isn't a virtue. And it wasn't like Shinaniwa hated me or anything, he just looked down on me.
Is there really a difference? Anyway, did this Shinaniwa take part in the study session too?
No, he was the type to study alone. He wasn't as exclusionary as Koma, though. The kid looked down on people he thought were beneath him, and even cut them off at times, but he was really friendly with anyone he saw to be on his level or above.
Sounds like he's the worst.
He wasn't a bad guy. Wasn't a bad guy, another line I could utter only because we weren't close. What did I know about Ayazu Shinaniwa or Sodachio Ikura? Familiarity with a guy's profile doesn't make you his friend.
But everyone in class, including this current third year, Shinaniwa, accepted you as chair in the end. Why was that?
Well, someone from the study session running the meeting would be bad, right? Just like how Koma pointed out that Ikura was the most likely suspect. About half of the class lost any right to be chair, but that didn't mean anyone from the remaining half would do. We were there because of a math test, after all. We'd be examining the questions asked on it, so you couldn't leave it to someone with only so-so math grades.
Ha! Well, I suppose. Still, the average score of the students who were absent or who didn't participate in the study session was 20 points lower than the average of the students who did. Did anyone in the non-participating group score high enough to rival the study session students?
Sure, I want to say Hayamachi got a 92. The participants weren't the only people who did well on the final, which did make things a little complicated. Only one student, though, got a higher score than everyone from the study session. Yours truly.
Ooh.
Which is why I was chosen to chair the meeting.
Can't stand listening to any more of this. Teachers make test questions on computers these days. You could get them without sneaking into the teacher's room if you hacked them. You watch too many TV shows. To repeat myself, I think it was Oikura who taught us the last question on the test during the study session. I'm not certain, though. If you're not certain, then don't speak up. How would you take responsibility for ruining someone's life? You've always been like that, you know. Please raise your hand. Listen, I just want to go home. Can you do this somewhere without me? We're not letting you leave. They might say you did it if you leave. Fine with me, I just have to be the bad guy, right? Gross. Stop trying to act cool. Or are you trying to pull here? The other day? Higuma would never. You were invited to the study session but didn't show up. May I ask why? Are you really going to suspect me? I thought you weren't that kind of person. Excuse me. Everyone, please settle down. Let's stay calm. How are we supposed to be calm? Haven't we had enough? If something's suspicious, why not let Sensei handle it? I think there's meaning in trying to correct our own mistakes. We ought to handle our own business. I said I don't have anything to do with this. Raise your hand before you speak. And anyway, if Araragi got a perfect score, it was possible to solve every problem on the test. Claiming that there had to be cheating or foul play makes no sense. Ugh, I'm starting to get annoyed. I want to leave already. Leave if you want. Become the culprit. What right do you have to talk? You didn't even get the trig problems right. What about you? Who gets the geometry questions wrong? You could tell the figures were similar just by looking at them. Why don't we do it this way? We put up the names of everyone who got the 3 big problems right but not the smaller ones. And what'd be the point? Why are you acting like that? Stop being so emotional. Let's think about this logically, everyone. Don't think, feel. This isn't the time for jokes. Nadagutsu, Senjogahara, you've been quiet this whole time. What do you think? I don't know. Hey, everyone, there's something I want to say. Say it later. Keep your voice down. It's pathetic. Pathetic! What are you scared of? Feeling guilty much? The one thing we've established is that I didn't do it. You're the only one dumb enough to believe that. Excuse me, I'd like you to take that back. Araragi, you need to lead us. Easy for you to say. Couldn't it have been plain cheating? Like a whole group of students cheating. That still implicates someone from the study session. And the other subjects? There weren't polarized scores for them, were there? It's not like we had study sessions for them. With a little thought, you'd realize that yourself. Why should I know? So, the culprit didn't steal any other tests. Why not steal tests for other subjects while you're there? Stop acting like you're an expert. What do you think you are, a detective? Then anyone with high scores in other subjects is suspicious? Why did we only have a study session for math to begin with? I would have attended a history one. Obviously, because it'd look bad if the math average was low for a class whose homeroom teacher taught math. In other words, it's about appearances. Our dear class president wanted to score points with sensei. That's not why. It's because mathematics is the most beautiful of all the disciplines. You're literally the only one who thinks that. What does that even mean? Beautiful. So, you just felt like it. It always has to be about you, huh? I hate math personally. You don't understand the beauty of math? Schoolwork isn't about love or hate. Why are you even at Naotsu High? What, jealous? What'd you just say? Please don't fight. We're not fighting, it's because a certain someone is spouting nonsense that it's weird for me to be at this school. I didn't go that far. I don't care about math. I'm a humanities person. I'm planning on applying to a school that doesn't have a math exam. Oh, me too. Stop trying to piggyback on other people's comments, will you? Why are you lashing out at me? All of you have gotten so quiet all of a sudden. What gives? I'm just staying silent because there's nothing for me to say. I have an alibi. An alibi when we don't even know when the crime took place. I have someone to testify. On my behalf. Someone who'd guarantee I'd never do such a thing. What about motive? Would someone do this just for kicks? Generally speaking, the culprit wouldn't stand to benefit if the class's average score rose. Wouldn't you normally be happier if the overall score went down? Then this isn't a general or normal case. Are you trying to say something here? Out with it. I'm saying there isn't, and there's nothing I want to say. These are leading questions. Are you all done yet? I'm sick and tired of this. I had plans to go on a date today. Wait, you two are still going out? It's my call, isn't it? Can I take a nap? Come on, let's go through and think about what happened in order. It started with news about a study session getting passed around in class, and why didn't that note make it to me? I'd have never found out if Ishigata hadn't told me. Were you trying to avoid me? Are you bullying me? Do you not like me? Do you not like me? No, of course it wasn't intentional. It's just that you weren't there. Let's all get along, okay? It's too late for that. I mean, people think I did it. I haven't done anything wrong. There's no smoke without fire. You know, that's the thing with you. Oh, that's my line. Yeah, why ever have a study session? Studying is something you do alone.
No one was raising a hand at this point. It'd become an assembly where everyone just said what they felt like saying. The template of a fruitless discussion, a space where every line sounded typical and devoid of any creativity. I mentioned plays earlier, and at this point it was like a bunch of hammy actors rehearsing their flat delivery. We were managing to hurt one another, but without speaking our minds. A true wasteland. A true hellhole. I remained on top of things as long as it was still one discussion, but once smaller squabbles started popping up, it got impossible to control. I don't mean to justify myself, but regardless of who was chair, it was probably the fated outcome, and in the chaos, I weaved my way through the rows to where Ikura sat glumly. This isn't going any further. There's no way to get it back under control. It was 5:58, and I gave her my notice, or rather, declaration of surrender. What I'd been defeated at, I didn't know, but I certainly couldn't fulfill the role assigned to me, out of spite or not, by the class president. Give me a break. We should end this before it gets any worse.
What are you whining for? You got a better score than me and you want to give up?
Oikura glared at me, but her glare lacked the intensity it had at the beginning. She was exhausted too. While my surrender was nothing more than me throwing in the towel, I also told myself that I was rescuing her. That's right, I'm giving up. It's hopeless.
I'm not letting anyone leave until we find the culprit.
There's no way. Everyone's going home once the closing bell rings. You must know that yourself. I leveled with her, maybe I shouldn't have. Someone had to say it, but even if I didn't, Tetsujo or Shui could. That it was me of all people, though incited her. I'd forgotten just how much Oikura hated me. I should have passively, irresponsibly ceded the awful task to someone else. Was I really dispensing advice to her out of some sense of duty, or was I hoping for something? She simply saw me as a rival, and down deep, didn't really hate me. Was I so conceited that I thought we'd be on good terms? One day since she was just playing hard to get? The truth was different. With heartfelt contempt, which surpassed her exhaustion, she spat.
I hate you.
She stood and made a beeline to the teacher's desk, leaving me behind. She slammed her hands on it to get everyone's attention. She did, yet the commotion didn't abate, which is why she shouted,
Everyone!
With this, the room finally fell silent, but everyone looked gloomy and disgusted and wasn't hiding it. They must have thought that a new chair at this point would do nothing to tighten all the screws that had come loose. I myself felt like reorganizing the meeting would only bring us back to square one. Any change in chairs should have come earlier. Just as I expected, the first student to have complained, was about to lodge another complaint, but Oikura held even that at bay.
Everyone! I think we've discussed the matter sufficiently.
Oh, I thought, forgetting her parting show of contempt and breathing a sigh of relief. So Oikura too had given up and wanted to wrap this meeting. As the one who'd convened the class council, or perhaps who'd arranged the study session, she was going to draw the line and bring this to a close. We hadn't come to a conclusion, nor had we found the culprit, nor had the culprit come forward. But we all did our best, came together. She'd spout such lines, maybe make us give ourselves a round of applause and let everyone go. Yes, the mood would be awkward and unpleasant in our class for a while, but she was going to choose the best way to settle this. Nope, no such luck. She would search for this culprit until the bitter end. A smart girl like her didn't need me to tell her that we had to bring things to an end, but dead set on coming to a conclusion, no matter what. If adjourn, we must.
So I'm going to take a vote.
Foolish and irredeemable. The worst option. This proclamation.
We'll decide who the culprit is by majority vote.
I still wonder, just what kind of result was Oikura hoping for, anyway? What kind of conclusion did she think her proposal would bring us to? Was a conclusion all that mattered to her, even if it wasn't the truth? You can decide even if you don't know. Finger, even if things are unclear. Then again, she said it from the start. The meeting would continue until we found the culprit, or the culprit came forward. She never said it'd go on until we know who the culprit is. I always tended to be the class loner. One time in middle school, we even had a council meeting about it, like to acculturate me, which does sound absurd in retrospect. And as the discussion unfolded, it started to make less and less sense. At some point it devolved into a session where everyone criticized me and my uncooperativeness. I guess meetings easily lose direction that way. I didn't think much of it because by preferring to be alone, I was partly to blame. I had no complaints about the conclusion either. Araragi should work to get along with everyone, but choosing a culprit based on a majority vote.
I see what you mean, but can't wholly dismiss the idea. Jury systems are common in the West, and a lay judge system is taking root, even in Japan. Of course, juries require a unanimous decision, and even lay decisions aren't made. But if you did discuss everything, maybe Oikura made the right decision.
Ogi whispered by my ear, as if to console me. If I wasn't careful, I might let her. But no. That's not how it was. She was just going over the theory. What happened was that we made the wrong decision. I ought to have stopped Oikura, even if it meant slugging her. Yet the majority vote proceeded, not even with a secret ballot, but with a show of hands. Year 1 Class 3 was asked to raise our hand for one of the names she called out in order of roll call number. Who thinks no? 2. Koyomi Araragi is the culprit. Please raise your hand.
Huh? And the majority spoke and framed you as the culprit. Now I see why it wasn't the discussion, but the conclusion that made you despair. Yes, it makes sense for someone to lose faith in humanity in that case. Please accept my sincerest sympathies.
No. Oikura was the only one who voted for me.
What?
The majority raised their hand when she called no. 6-Sodachi Oikura. It brought everything to an end. No need to call out the remaining students' names and ask for a show of hands. Even if she'd tried, I doubt Oikura could even speak. I'll never forget the look of despair on her face. That despair must have snagged me as well. No one ever saw Oikura at Naoetsu High again. Not because she dropped out like Yuba, she was still registered. But she stopped coming to school entirely, for classes or for tests. Despite her absence, she received some sort of special treatment thanks to her smarts and wasn't held back, and apparently was matriculated in one of the third-year classes, though no one knew which one. Some said she reaped what she sowed, while others more bluntly called it digging her own grave. And yes, in hindsight, what else did she expect from a majority vote? She'd confined everyone after school, trapping them in a space high on the discomfort index, and grilled us mercilessly. Something was very wrong with you if you thought it wouldn't result in malice, but realizing that people hate you isn't easy, just as I hadn't grasped in any true sense her violent contempt for me. I could only watch as she walked into the jaws of death. I couldn't save her. I doubt she wanted me to, but still, shouldn't I have known? How else could it have turned out? Was I hoping to witness the fall of a girl who'd been hostile to me forever? Wasn't I just wishing for that look of despair on her face, which would be so vindicating for me? No, I was fully convinced I'd be the culprit in a majority vote, and that might have been Oikura's plan. It didn't seem too terrible, actually. Someone who obviously wasn't the culprit being named as the culprit offered a clean conclusion that left the least behind to fester. So much the better, since the heinous election would end at no. 2. My naive read on the situation made me turn a blind eye. In that sense, no. 1 being a sheen also led me astray. No way they'd treat a polite, handsome guy, the peacemaker from start to finish, as a criminal. But more importantly, the responsibility for her ruin did lie with me, if I was the reason why she grew intransigent and ran amok. I don't mean to say that was why. I don't, but I started taking even more days off, played hooky more often, because not seeing Oikura at school left me with this viscous sensation that was a little like guilt. Also, since that day, I never once got a perfect score in math.
Do you really need to feel so responsible? You said from the beginning Oikura was a prime suspect. Maybe all those votes for her were fair and impartial.
I'm sure some hands went up for that reason. It was an excellent excuse, but at least a few must have believed it for real. I tried telling myself that, but remember what I said. She decided on her own to hold the meeting, not because anyone asked her. It was meant to clear her of suspicion, because she was a prime suspect. Ironically, it ratified those doubts, but why call for a meeting if she was the culprit? That one fact is enough for me to declare that it wasn't her.
Heh! I see. Declare, huh?
Anyway, the class council ended up giving birth to a false charge, which, at the end of the day, was karmic retribution. Still,
It's more like being hoisted by your own petard, blowing yourself up with a bomb that you set. What? A clown? When I put it that way.
Ogi laughed. It was laughable. Oikura, along with the rest of us, had been in a farce. Even so, I said, seeing a false truth get forged, witnessing such a stupid decision made everything feel so messed up. It messed me up. The majority, most of the students, raised their hands as one without any prior arrangement or agreement, not even through glances. That moment when they decided on the truth and justice was settled is the scariest thing I ever saw. Speaking of losing sight, that was when. Losing sight? No, I lost so much more. Until then, I believed in something like the idea of rightness, that there are things in the world that are right, and that it's a question of if you can do them or not. But that's when I learned that no matter how wrong or cruel or stupid, as long as enough people agree, it becomes right. If 1,000,000 people approve, even an obvious mistake, a foolish failure, becomes right. The heavens revolved around the earth so long as everyone in the world believed it. Majority vote, the ugliest formula ever invented by humanity. The most unjust, unequal formula, but that was justice. Everyone said it was right, so it was right.
What an extreme argument, madly rushing from one extreme to the other. That's no different from saying everything that sells well is trash.
Maybe I'm being dumb. But if 1,000,000 people showed up to agree, even my dumb opinion becomes right. I learned that you can mass produce all the justice you could ever want, that justice arises from numbers. It's about establishing a majority. That's why I chose solitude over establishment. I don't need friends, they'll only lower my intensity as a human. That's what I ended up saying. It was the only way I could protect my own sense of things. My only choice was not belonging to any faction or gang. Of course, it all came tumbling down during spring break, 2 years later. I know it ended up going long, but this has been the tale of Koyomi Araragi. Thank you for listening, Ogi. You know, you said it. It was nothing. Now that I've talked about it, I feel all better now.
Well, that's no good.
Hmm?
I'm saying you shouldn't be feeling all better quite yet.
Stepping away from my neck area, at last, she quietly appeared in front of me. It'd been a while since I last got a head-on view of her smile so cute. It was almost uncanny.
We can't leave if the tale ends with Ikura not being the culprit. Have you forgotten? We need to identify the culprit to exit this classroom. The culprit you couldn't identify that day through majority vote.
We'll have to decide instead. Or so said Ogi. Now that she mentioned it, yes. Wait, no, that was only her hypothesis. You mean Oikura's deep-seated grudge from that day created this classroom? That does make me getting trapped in here seem like fate. Oikura. Had she still not forgiven me? Was she the same as that day? Did she hate me as much as ever? I hate you.
Nah, she's probably forgotten about you. That's how things go.
Then, what about this classroom?
Didn't I tell you? I think your mind gave birth to it. That's my definition, a classroom created by your mind, by your regret. If you'd pinned down the culprit that day, Sodachi Okura wouldn't have met her downfall. And you wouldn't have lost your sense of justice. It's your regret that created this classroom. If the school's closing time had never come that day, 5:58. That's where the clock was stopped. Stop time suspended. Time continued to stagnate for over 2 years. You've been after that sense of justice ever since you lost it that day and created this classroom to retrieve it.
I did? Was that possible? It's not as if I had Shinobu's power to generate matter, so for me to create a room would be, but then again, every aberration has its reasons. In that case, me being the reason was enough. Okay, but justice? We were talking about 2 years ago. How could we figure out the culprit now, when our whole discussion came up empty back then? Were Ogi and I going to be trapped here forever, unable to leave school for eternity? No, forget about me, but Ogi didn't deserve this. Even if our misadventure started with her, it was too much for me to bear. In that case, there was only one course of action. No matter how impossible, we had to do what had to be done. Okay, we'll redo that meeting. This time we can't just find someone guilty, we have to find the true culprit.
No. If it's the true culprit you want, I already know.
Ogi blithely thwarted my determination.
And I think you know, too, who really should have been condemned at the class council. The one who ruined your, as Oikura might put it, sacred math final? That much was clear from hearing you speak. You feel awful about what happened to Oikura because unconsciously you know who the culprit is. Otherwise you wouldn't have told it that way.
Told it what way?
You deliberately hid one piece of info in your account to avoid casting doubt on a certain individual. In that sense, you're covering for the true culprit, whether you mean to or not. You're covering up the truth. That's why you feel so guilty about Oikura, who had to take the blame.
Deliberately? Covering up? Don't be ridiculous. What was I hiding? I'll never forget what happened in that meeting. Whatever I might try to hide, I couldn't.
Right, you couldn't. It tells me your unconscious knew the identity of the culprit. You've been averting your gaze from it the whole time. Just like Tsubasa Nekawa used to.
I didn't get it. What was this girl saying? What did this girl know?
I don't know anything. You're the one who does, my dear senior Kayomi Araragi. Kuyomi. And with a clearing of the throat, the great detective gathered them all and began, but there's no great detective here. So I guess I'll do it instead. Why don't we begin the solemn business of figuring out who'd done it in part to mourn the idiot dunce and fool brought to ruin by the weight of her own sins, Sodachi Oikura, as it is what she too wanted. Oh, I nearly forgot. Something does need to be said if this is who done it. Convention is important, you see, whether you're banishing aberrations or solving mysteries.
Ogi snickered at my puzzled look. Ogi Ashino, Mimi Ashino's niece and transfer student, turned around, then struck a pose like a kabuki actor, facing no one but the blackboard. I couldn't catch her expression because of the angle, but I could almost see it.
I challenge the reader. Komichi Tetsu.
No preface, no pause, no build-up. The words casually slipped out of Ogi Yoshino. In response to hearing that the culprit was someone so unexpected, I was surprisingly unsurprised. It did nothing to move me. My heart was unshaken. Why? It should have been news to me. Could some part of me have known, like Odi said, that the crime was hers? And that Sodachi Oikura was a victim the patsy?
Shall I continue?
Yeah. She didn't need to say more, having spoken the name, but I had a duty to listen. A duty as the tale's narrator, to hear the truth of the matter, to listen rather than tell. What made you suspicious of Tetsujo? She was basically in the same position as the rest of us. Sure, her name came up a few more times than average, but couldn't you also say, the less they're mentioned, the more suspicious? If I was being arbitrary?
It wasn't the frequency. My initial doubt involved how many of you there were.
How many of us?
38. The number of characters who appeared in your tale, I counted them again, so I'm pretty certain. But it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't? Why not? It seems like a normal number of students.
It's not that.
Ogi took a look around the Year 1 Class 3 classroom, as if to inspect every empty seat, as if to observe them.
I believe you said the following. When you spoke of just how isolated you were, whether it was groups of 2, 3, or 4, you were always the one left over. That doesn't make sense. If there were 38 students in your class, that number is divisible by 2, and 2 students would be left over for groups of 3 and 4. There are no situations in which just one student is...
I couldn't even manage a response. She was right, and it wasn't even math. It was simple arithmetic.
Mathematics isn't my strong suit. Math C are far beyond me. Still, I can do division. Well, let's look for a number that leaves a remainder of 1, whether we divide it by 2, 3, or 4. Does that just barely count as mathematics? We simply have to find a common multiple of the 3 numbers, then add 1. The least common multiple of 2. 3 and 4 is 1, 2. 1, 2 plus 1 is 13. An odd coincidence given that you are in class 1, 3, but nowhere near enough students. Let's go to the next common multiple, which we can find by multiplying by 2, 4. 2, 4 plus 1 is 25. A fair number of classes around Japan are that size, but you described the study session as comprising about half of the class. You couldn't call 19 of 25 about half, so let's give it one more try. Multiply the least common multiple by 3 to get 36 plus 1. 37. Isn't that the correct number of students in Year 1 Class 3?
There was one outsider in there with us, but think about Oikura's decree. She specifically said no outsiders allowed. So how?
True. There shouldn't be, but her rule could be taken to mean that it's fine if you're a part of Year 1 Class 3. For instance, it's homeroom teacher.
Ogi spoke the words with a nasty smile.
As you noted at the very beginning, you found every last member of Year 1 Class 3 assembled there. Yes, and you used the word member, not every student of Year 1 Class 3. Of course, you could call your homeroom teacher a member of Year 1 Class 3. It wouldn't be odd for a teacher to attend a class council. From there, going back over your introductions of the 38, you used words like student, kid, boy, girl, uniform, classmate, first year, high schooler, club member, and so on to describe all of them, except for one, that being Komichi Tetsujo. And so, through a fundamental element of both mystery novels and mathematics, the process of elimination and of non-contradiction, I could identify Tetsujo as the culprit. Oops, should I be using her title?
Should I say Tetsujo Sensei? Then again, it sounds like she went by Joe, and you yourself didn't bother either.
She seems pretty laid back, so I guess it's fine.
Ogi grinned, then continued. Ogi grinned!
When you said she was on the softball team, you probably meant as its advisor now, really. You talk in such misleading ways. Oh, but you did call her above the fray. Was that meant to be elusive, now that I think about it?
Nah, I wasn't trying to be.
Furthermore, when the three girls brought you to the classroom, I said that all of the seats must have been filled, to which you said that technically Ariko, Kijikeri, Tone, and Ikora's were open. But that doesn't seem right, does it? It'd be strange unless your seat was open too, or could anyone have taken in it, like, say, your homeroom teacher?
It's not that Ikura wouldn't let you sit. You couldn't to begin with, remarked Oji.
Just corroborating evidence, of course. A small detail. So, tell me, is my deduction that Komichi Tetsujo was not a student, but a teacher completely off the mark? Am I just nitpicking?
You got it. You're right. There were 37 students in Year 1 Class 3. There were 38 people at the class council, including Tetsujo, our homeroom teacher. But just because Tetsujo was our teacher doesn't mean she's automatically the culprit. All it means is that we had a friendly teacher who'd sit in a student's seat during a class council meeting.
The mediator. What a clever way to refer to a homeroom teacher.
Ogi laughed. Alvi laughed, almost ignoring me. Hey!
Of course, I would have suspected your homeroom teacher, even if her name never came up at all. Someone said it as the meeting began to break down, right? Could anyone really find out the questions on a test before it's given?
Ogi stepped toward my leaning body. Our faces were far too close, and I shrank back. Weak?
It'd be so hard. Sneak into the teacher's room, hack the computer system. What kind of culprit would do something like that just for kicks?
Teachers are free to go in and out of the teacher's room, but that's not enough of a reason to doubt.
Please don't play dumb. Not after how far we've come. This, too, was brought up as the meeting broke down. If I'm not mistaken, Year 1 Class 3's homeroom teacher was a math teacher. Komichi Tetsujo taught math. Given that position, it's not an issue of prior knowledge. She was making the questions. There was zero risk.
Ogi really had listened carefully to even the smallest details. An honest-to-God good listener. Even if that was true, how could she get the questions she made to the study session? Tetsuso didn't take part in it. Not that a teacher ever would, unlike with class council meetings. So how did she leak the info? Through whom?
She didn't have to go through anyone, and neither did the information. Who was it again? Higuma. They'd have found it unnatural if someone tried to leak the test questions. It was only his impression, so I'm not sure if I should buy it. But his testimony is worth considering. One more thing. An important point. Why not leak all of the questions? If you're going to leak, I don't see a reason to leak just part of the test.
If you're going to say that, why leak them in the first place?
That will be made clear later. The logical answer would be that Tetsujo didn't disseminate the information to the study session. It was nothing but a wholesome place of mutual learning and betterment, just as Okura wanted.
Then why did the 19 students in the session?
Simple. Tetsusu was in a position to create the test questions. In that case, she just needed to have them match up with what the study session covered.
An exclamation mark, on cue, but I still wasn't shocked. The very picture of composure, my mind accepted Ogi's surprising truth.
Tsunahama, on day duty, complained about having to clean up after the study session early in the morning, right? She had Tetsujo and me and Fukuishi help her. What kind of cleaning up did they do? Come on, won't you tell me? How did they clean up after them?
They threw out bags of snacks and straightened the desks.
The other thing,
And erased the blackboard, I guess. I'd hesitated to reply the blackboard. Yes, in heavy use during the class council meeting, but any study session had to involve examples on a blackboard too. In other words, the participants had left traces of their session on the blackboard for all to see. The surface of a blackboard is only so large, of course, so they must have written and erased and written again. Not everything they put there would have been legible, but you'd be able to read a portion of it.
yes indeed. And if you knew what they went over at the study session, you could create matching test questions. It was the day of the final, of course. Even if you could change the questions, I'm sure you could only change a portion of them anyway.
So only a portion of the questions lined up with the study session, because she couldn't get a full picture of it from the blackboard, and because there wasn't enough time. We had math during second period, so she'd have reworked the questions during our PE test. Could we chalk Mibi's high score up to the fact that, like Tetsujo? She saw the questions while she was cleaning up before class, and they were imprinted on her mind.
Right. She must have realized during the meeting, which explains her discomfort. She must not have wanted to slip up and say anything that'd lump her in with the participants. Of course, there were also some students like Sunahama and Fukuishi who looked at the blackboard and didn't learn a thing. I think we should call that a show of talent from me.
True, not every student can get math questions right, just by knowing them ahead of time.
And Tetsuto must have thought so too. I bet she was surprised when the average score went up by so much. Only Aigami participated in the session and got a bad score, while everyone else got an 80 or higher. Really? What really blindsided her, though, was Oikura holding this whodunit. I'm sure Tetsuto's heart was pounding the whole time. She thought her crime might come to light.
To the point that she could mediate between me and Oikura. I pulled back. Ogi creeped toward me, she continued, a desk in between us, but close enough for me to feel her breath.
We might also surmise that she took part in the meeting out of fear, in order to lead the discussion if it came down to it, you see. Not that she should have been worried. No one is going to think that the teacher, of all people, is the puppet be like the detective, or the police being the culprit of a mystery novel, a real blind spot for people. Then again, stories where the detective or the police are the culprit have been done to death. Seriously, did no one suspect the teacher?
No one.
Other than you.
Well, if you're going to say I did, I'm sure everyone else did too. But we were trying to convince ourselves there was no way. Were we relieved then? That the majority vote came to an end at suspect no. 6? No, it didn't matter how far down the roll we went, our homeroom teacher wasn't on it. Her name would never have been called.
What's left the motivation behind the crime? Not leaking the questions exactly, but whatever it is she did.
Oh, you promised you'd make that clear later. Does that mean you have that figured out too?
It'd be a nonsensical crime for a student, even for thrills. It's hard to figure out a motive. Raising the average score would have the relative effect of worsening the grade deviation among the students, one of the most important methods of ranking them. If I had to come up with something, maybe boosting the reputation of whoever Oikura in this case. But then, why convene the class council? As you said, it'd be something she absolutely shouldn't do. But there's one person whose reputation rose. If the class average rose, that being math teacher Tetsujo, also year 1 class 3's homeroom teacher. It would reflect well on her skills of instruction and guidance, and that was her motive.
But in that case, she could just tell us during class, this will appear on the final. Why go to the trouble of lining the test up with her students' predictions?
No. She'd be found out if she did it in class. It had to be subtle, though. She went a little too far. 3 questions is too much. She should have kept it to 1 or 2, swapped in at the last second. Seems she underestimated the academic abilities of her students.
Yeah. It also meant she made light of her own abilities as an instructor. Her own class had managed to come up with the problems. And as a result, she lost one of her best students.
Anything else, Araragi-senpai?
Why would there be?
Then why don't we get going?
With that beaming back at me and my curt answer, Ogi hopped away and made her way to the door, with light footsteps insouciant.
You can leave now.
She put her hand on the door and said, "Yeah." I followed Ogi's footsteps with plodding ones. Looking down at my wristwatch, I saw that it was 5:58, the exact same time as the classroom clock. The angle of the hands agreed at last, like the stars aligning. Even a broken clock is right 2 times a day. No. The clock hanging in the classroom must have started ticking again, like the gig was up. Because I had come out with the answer. Because I went and identified the culprit, time resumed. The bell announcing the end of the day would be ringing soon. What do you mean? I can leave.
Excuse me.
Well, it was an odd way to put it. What did you mean by that?
Oh, do you not know? Vampires need permission from someone inside a building or a room in order to enter it.
Right. I've never experienced that myself, though.
Well, Shinobu is a special model. But since you couldn't exit here rather than enter, I thought I'd try telling you that you could. A little incantation meant to put you at ease.
You're almost making it sound like you were the one who locked me in.
Don't be silly. I'd never lock you in a room. Why would I ever? You were trapped by your own past this whole time for 2 years. Isn't that right? Just a guess, of course, but think of what it must feel like for a teacher, someone meant to symbolize fairness to a student, to do something dishonest, and a friendly, trusted teacher who acted as the class mediator. At that, who could blame you for closing off your heart out of a sense of betrayal? It destroyed one student. After all, she's been promoted despite her attendance, partly because of her excellent marks, but isn't it also atonement on Tetsuzu's part?
Atonement? No, it's an excuse. She just wants to believe that she's a decent human being. I muttered, in a harsher tone than I expected. As if to distract from this, I put a hand on the classroom door to open it, but Ogi gently laid her hand on top of mine, a moment before I could. What happened next? You need to tell me. Until you do, I won't let you leave. She seemed to be saying this. What made me give up? So I did. Digging up memories I'd locked away, unable to ever forget, of the meeting that had taken place in this classroom 2 years ago, on July 15th, recalling that majority vote. The true reason I gave up on justice. I didn't despair because of the meeting itself, because of the vote itself. It wasn't the aspect of truth itself. Alright, next. No. 6. Who thinks the culprit is me, Sodachi Oikura? Please raise your hand. I gave up on justice because. There, among all my classmates designating Oikura as the culprit, Tetsujo, our teacher, her hand raised straight. That's why. The door opened. Now let's go home. The meeting is over. You can't stay at school forever. The epilogue, or maybe, the punchline of this story. The next day, I was roused from bed by my little sisters Karen and Tsukihi, who, unlike me, still believe that such a thing as immutable justice exists in the world, and I headed to school on foot as I still couldn't buy a new bicycle. I guess it was good for my health. On a whim, I stopped by the AV room before heading to my classroom. More precisely, next to the AV room. And as if it was the most natural thing, there was no empty classroom, not even the dead space from Oji's notebook. Just the AV room, a plain corner room, not even longer than average by the length of one classroom. Ah, another supernatural phenomenon, I thought, but no, that couldn't be it. Ogi had just measured wrong, that's all. She'd created a non-existent space in the process of mapping out the school's buildings. There was nothing here. Nothing happened here. No hidden or locked room, no whodunit. No surprising truth, no class council, and no majority vote. All of it was in the past, over and done. Still, I thought, I ought to let Ogi know I'd have Kanbara connect us next time we met, since I didn't have her contact info. Musing, I moved buildings and headed to my classroom. I passed by the teacher's room on the way. Komichiti Tetsujo wouldn't be there. No, she didn't quit out of a guilty conscience or get dismissed after her wrongdoing was uncovered. It was for an auspicious reason. She was pregnant and on maternity leave, loved by her students. She received congratulations from all as she left. She wouldn't be coming back to school before I graduated, even if you didn't take into account the time she'd take off to care for her baby. I doubt Tetsuju and I would ever in our lives meet again. I had no feelings about that. After I saw her raise her hand from the back that day, 2 years ago she'd stopped being a teacher or a grown-up to me. To be honest, I'm unsure how much of the truth of this case I'd known, whether in my conscious or subconscious mind. But if there was a reason I never spoke about her like she was a teacher throughout my tale, that would be it. Under no circumstances was I trying to cover for her. As Ogi put it, I bet it'd only net me an insincere reply, if I told her though. I walked past the teacher's room with no change in my stride. I arrived at my current third-year classroom, but as I tried to enter, I nearly bumped into Hanakawa, who'd just exited.
Morning, Araragi?
Oh, good morning, Hanakawa?
Bad timing.
Excuse me?
It might be better if you don't go in there.
What? Hup! Hanakawa separated me from the classroom by pushing me away from it with both palms, the cutest palm strikes ever. Once we'd moved back several feet, she whispered into my ear.
Did you ever notice the one empty seat in our class, Araragi? Araragi.
Yeah. I guess I thought it was a backup chair. What about it? Why, did you come to class today to find a ghost sitting in it? You'll need more than a ghost to scare me off at this point.
Not a ghost, a person was sitting in it. A classmate who hasn't come to school in ages suddenly decided to show up today?
Huh, really? So then the seat belonged to this person. That's a surprise. We had one more classmate than I thought. But why does that mean I shouldn't go inside?
Because it's Miss Oikura.
Tsubasa Hanakawa said, solemnly, with a concerned look that seemed to presage a tragedy that was about to befall me.
Sadachi Oikura seems to have been studying at home for 2 years, and as if in exchange for Miss Tetsujo, she's back at school. You two are on bad terms, right?
Sadachi Oikura hated me. With the kind of deep hatred you might feel for a homewrecker, in fact, I couldn't help but wonder what you had to do to become so hated, or to hate so much. Think about her position. Hating a specific person to that degree had to be pretty stressful. Granted, I'm not the most likable person, neither too amiable nor attractive, but even then, I couldn't recall doing anything that deserved being glared at with eyes like hers. Well, I suppose there's one reason I'm aware of, which is that I was better than her at math, but it's not as if that actually harmed her. And in retrospect, it feels like her glare was set on me from the first time I met her in Year 1 Class 3's classroom. Soon after we entered Naotsu High. Does that sound paranoid? It's not as if she had access to my entrance exam results. I don't even know myself what I got. And anyway, in terms of the final link to that fateful meeting, I only happened to get a perfect score that time around. It wasn't consistent. She must have had good days during first term and outscored me on quizzes, and math is a broad, catch-all term to begin with. Surely she understood some things better than me. She couldn't have honestly believed I was to blame for no one calling her Euler. Come to think of it, did a high school girl really want such a nickname? Wasn't it just a pretext? No one can dispute Euler's greatness as a mathematician, but what you go by is something else entirely. I respect Tsubasa Hanakawa, for example, but have no desire to be called Tsubasa or Hanakawa. Oikura must have misunderstood me, just as I misunderstood her. Misunderstandings tend to multiply. That's what I think, but there's this other striking thought I have, something else that I think is strange, which is that while Sadachi Oikura hated me, I in no way hated Sadachi Oikura. I think that's very unusual. In general, it's really hard not to hate someone who hates you. Not that I liked her. Of course, I'm not twisted enough to adore someone who glares at me all the time and subjects me to prickling acts of spite that might not be outright attacks. Such high-level twistedness isn't for me. Still, while I found her attitude dislikable, I couldn't say I hated it. I couldn't. Why not? A far more serious question in a way than why she hated me so. Why couldn't I hate her? In fact, temperamentally and philosophically, incompatible with the Naotsu High student body, I might have even held her in relatively high regard, though I'd never go so far as to say I had a good impression of her. Thinking well of people just because they're great at math, or love math, I'm not so good-natured, or simple. Maybe it was part of why I found it hard to repudiate her. But if I kept her in mind, if my memories never let go of her even after she stopped coming to school, after she couldn't do to her own highly unsympathetic act of self-destruction, it involved something other than academics. Or so I thought. Vague, half-formed thoughts about a girl I believed I'd never meet again. Yet running into her at school 2 years later forced me to face that old question. Not just face. I was pressed for an answer, for a solution. I'd come to know why she hated me, why I couldn't hate her, what she was to me, what I was to her, what we weren't to each other. Truths revealed after 2 years, as well as truths revealed after 5. Revealed and exposed. Actually, we can cut out the hyperbole and suspense. I can even divulge the solution right now. Turns out math was entrenched in our conflict, and I was in fact a sort of homewrecker to her, or worse. Also, some things you never forget, and some things you do forget. When you can't recall why someone hates you, it could be that you just forgot why. Mathematically then, or perhaps dramatically, in the manner of a mystery novel, I set forth this problem proved the following. Why, when Sadachi Oikura hates Koyomi Araragi, can Koyomi Araragi not hate Sadachi Oikura? Ignore Ogi Oshino when answering this problem. It can be embarrassing to visit your alma mater, and I confess I'd never once returned to public middle school number 701 since graduating. Despite it being in walking distance, I didn't bring myself there for nearly 3 years. Then again, it's not like I had any particular reason to head back there after receiving my diploma. Only natural. I hadn't belonged to any sort of club I could go back and visit as an alumnus, either. In fact, you could say I'd started to forget that I was ever a middle schooler, but after taking one step through its nostalgic gates, a torrent of memories came rushing back to me. I remembered so many things, all of a sudden, good things, bad things, things that didn't matter, even awkward things. I remembered what the disconnected memories had in common was probably embarrassment, but to my chagrin, none of the roused remembrances were of what Ikura hinted at. I couldn't conjure or come up with anything.
This is where you went to middle school? No wonder it feels so stately.
Ogi said, grinning next to me. Her attitude made it hard to tell how serious she was being, and I wondered whether she got it from her uncle. There was nothing stately about it. MS701 was as bland as could be. It was a plain, ordinary middle school in a provincial city, unworthy of special attention. Then again, I did think it was special just because I'd gone there. Is that what Ogi was getting at? It feels a little strange, though. Even after I graduated from it, this middle school is still right here, doing its middle school thing.
Of course it is. What kind of place exists for no one's sake but your own? Just because a place is important to you, that doesn't mean you're important to it. You're such a fool.
A true fool, laughed Ogi. Fine, maybe it was laughable better than leaving her at a loss for words. It was about 4 in the afternoon, and the students, done with classes for the day, stared at us with suspicion as we stood by its gates. They left school like it was the most natural thing to do, the way I had, and tomorrow, they'd return like it was the most natural thing to do, believing the cycle would last forever, not yet knowing that it had come to a sudden end as soon as they graduated.
Remind me, do your 2 honorable younger sisters deign to grace this place with their presence?
Why so excessively polite when you're talking about my sisters? No, they don't, they're at private school.
Ah, right! Suganoki's second middle's fire sisters, was it? By the way, what is Suganoki's second middle short for?
Suganoki Middle School number 2. Anyway, my friend here at MS701 is called Nadeko Sengoku, and, should have contacted her ahead of time, so she could accompany us. Graduate or not, I felt a little awkward walking into the school. Any way you cut it, it's such a crazy world out there. I probably wouldn't be treated as some kind of suspicious individual, but some teacher might say something if we wandered about too much.
We're fine. Stand tall. There's no need to be afraid. Just pretend it's 3 years ago.
Encouraged Ogi. Reservations about high schoolers stepping foot into a middle school weren't for her, unlike me. She'd been a middle school student until the previous year. Maybe it wasn't very worrying for her. Still, and also unlike me, MS701 was in no way her territory. She was totally ignorant of the place, never having seen, heard, or been to it before, so it made sense for her to be a little anxious, and yet.
When you put it that way, I'm ignorant of most places. I don't know anything. Let's go. It's far more suspicious for us to vacantly linger by the gates. You don't want them calling a policeman on us, do you? We'll be swift. In and out. What you might call a touch and go. The shoe cupboards, was it?
Oh, yeah. The shoe cupboards. Ogi was on her way, and I followed behind, flustered. Like the day before when I was locked in a room with her, the decisiveness and speed with which she acted was amazing. As someone liable to get lost in his own thoughts and entangled in speculation, her recklessness had me wrapped around her little finger. You could say she had me off balance, feeling the need to reclaim my status as her senior. I overtook her with long, fast strides. The shoe cupboards, that's what Ikura said. Not that I'm positive she was telling the truth. This is Oikura we're dealing with. She might have told some sort of irresponsible lie to torment me.
An irresponsible lie that does seem possible. Yes, it does indeed. There are just so many liars out there in the world. This shoe cupboard, then, will be nothing but a bunch of wasted legwork. Still a worthwhile after-school activity to have gotten the opportunity to accompany my dear senior Araragi.
Stop sounding like Conver with that dear senior and opportunity to accompany. Why'd you ever respect me?
Please be a little more self-aware. The stories I've heard of you facing aberrations here in this town for the past half year make you worthy of quite a lot of respect. Are you trying to get me to go down the list one by one? You must remember it all. It's in your bones.
In my bones.
Yes, I'm talking about your memories.
True. I couldn't claim the memories weren't a part of me, I just have to overlook how unmistakably influenced by Kambari she sounded. Overlook, or maybe put up with, or maybe ignore. It was an issue I'd have to deal with someday, but the one I needed to address at the moment was Sodachi Oikura. A serious issue I couldn't simply put up with, an issue thrust before me with all the weight of her sudden appearance at school after 2 straight years of absence. I couldn't approach this with my guard down. Sure, Oikura coming back to school before graduation, and for the first time since that meeting was something to be celebrated, but
What a strange coincidence, as I suppose these things really do happen. You told me about her, and you were reunited the next day. A twist of fate indeed.
I admit I was surprised. I didn't even know we were in the same class. That I didn't was a shock in itself, of course, no matter how uninterested in my surroundings and disconnected from my class I might be. When I went and checked, though, her name really was on the roll. As this year's class vice president, at least in name, you could call my oversight a blameworthy case of negligence. Did I deliberately ignore it? Had I not noticed because doing so would remind me of that day and the class council? Of those memories?
Life is just one surprise after the next. You never know what might happen, which is why it's so much fun.
I'd call it the opposite of fun. Ogi seemed to be enjoying herself, but my heart was actually quite heavy. If what happened today was continuing on into tomorrow and beyond, this was no time to be worried about entrance exams. Right, what if today was just a warm-up? I had to deal with this aspect before the main event began. And thus, the getabako.
Yeah, the shoe cupboards.
They weren't getaboxes anymore. No middle schooler was going to wear wooden sandals to school in this day and age. I doubt the regulations even permitted it. Oji and I entered the building and arrived in front of the shoe cupboard in question. Well, Oikura hadn't directed me to the cupboard itself, but its contents. Inside the cupboard,
So, which one is it? Which did you use when you...
oh, if we're looking for the first year's corner, I replied, guiding her. Maybe corner wasn't accurate. Area would be more like it. But what could I do? The word came to my mouth and slipped out in the moment. It wasn't worth correcting, so I led Oji. Yes, around here, if nothing changed since my days. It's actually surprising how well I remember. It's like my body does, rather than my mind. The school's very existence had been hazy to me until just moments ago, but now that I'd gone and stepped foot inside, it was as if my feet knew the way they moved of their own accord.
He is... Well, I understand the feeling. As someone who's transferred all around a memory that seemed to be nowhere in your conscious mind getting dug up all of a sudden, it really is such a flimsy thing. You think you remembered or recalled something, but that could be far from the truth.
Ogi said. Her strange and bothersome remark made me all the more anxious, but I identified the space I undoubtedly used at the time. I identified it. This seems obvious, but it was another student's now, so it wasn't as if the label read Araragi like 5 years ago. Still,
This is it. The spot where the new middle schooler Koyomi Araragi swapped his outdoor shoes for indoor slippers each and every day. How moving.
moving? Me swapping one pair of footwear for another?
What kind of young gentleman were you?
Young gentleman. I was a middle schooler. Come on. That said, A high schooler can't help thinking of a first-year middle schooler as young. And in fact, I was such a child then that I acted painfully childish take the way I saw truth, or justice. I never doubted their existence. I'd resolved to always do the right thing. Yes, just like my younger siblings, the Fire Sisters. A bloated self-consciousness, what's more childish than that?
Oops! You've gone quiet all of a sudden. Is something the matter? Oh, you! Staying silent like that. You seem all the more manly. You're going to make me fall in love with you at this rate.
No.
You realize you're in for a rough time if I do fall in love with you.
Yeah, I can definitely see that one. I don't know, but somehow hearing her praise me wasn't embarrassing, unlike with Kanbaru. Part of it is that Odi was clearly teasing me or being malicious in that sense. I guess Kanbar's bombastic accolades were convincing, sincere. To some extent. I'm just wondering what to do. We've come here. Just like Oikura said, but what's next? The shoe cupboard. Inside the one I used as a first-year middle schooler. I felt compelled to come and see, but now that I was here, all I remembered was its exact location. This was our terminus, a dead end. Why did Oikura want me to come here? Well, not that literally checking out my middle school shoe cupboard was the point. But then, what was she trying to tell me?
What next? There's only one thing to do next. Look inside.
Before I could stop her, unhalting, untroubled, and unstraying, Ogi put a hand on the space I used during my first year of middle school. She popped it open, even as I turned pale, taken aback yes. According to Oikura, the contents were the issue, so we'd have had to at some point. But it belonged to someone else now, an adorable, or maybe not. First-year middle schooler, a stranger. Entering the grounds without permission was a problem to begin with, but we were dealing with a student shoe locker here. You didn't have to be particularly considerate of privacy issues to know it shouldn't be tossed open. Thus my cold feet. I'd felt like our investigation had hit a brick wall, but OG had gone up to this wall, to this terminus, and dead end, and hopped over it with ease, like a hurdle in an obstacle race. Fearsome, the Yoshino bloodline. They didn't think twice about jettisoning a little bit of their ethics for the sake of an investigation. I had a similar thought the day before, but she really was born to be inquisitive. Prompt in assessment and decision. Her capability for resolute action seemed to engulf all else. Couldn't she at least warn me first, though?
You say that, but don't tell me you were going to wait for the student whose shoebox this is to show up so you could explain the situation and ask for permission to look inside.
That seems like a sensible plan to me.
You're so patient, one of your virtues, but no matter how patient you are, time waits for no man. If we lay in wait for a middle schooler, we'd be full-fledged, suspicious individuals at that point. Think about your bright future, which you'd be throwing down the drain.
Okay, but isn't it an even bigger problem to open a middle schooler's shoe locker without permission?
It's okay, Eli, if they find us and say I wanted to drop a love letter into the kids' box. There's no law out there that says I can't lie, not when the world is so full of liars. You can be my trusty senior who agreed to tag along with my timid self.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a good setup. I like my role too. But you know, Ogi, it might be a girl using that box now, given the penmanship.
Then you were the one planning to drop off the love letter. I'll be your junior who's tagging along.
A high school senior bringing along one of his juniors to drop off a love letter to a first-year middle schooler? Feels like you've flipped a great setup into an awful one. Come on, that's too fatal a drop for me and my role.
What's this? There are indoor slippers in here, which means its current user has already left. It had been impossible to get permission in advance. Why care when you get results? What do we have here?
Having noticed something, she stuck her hand inside. My request flew into the ether as OG, for whom not caring if you get results was a commendable attitude, moved once more to promptly assessed and decided action. But what could it be? Something suspicious about the slippers. What she extracted from the cupboard, however, wasn't footwear. 3. There were 3 envelopes. Envelopes? Huh? We'd been kidding, but love letters, in this day and age, billets do. And 3 of them? What? Was the user of this box Mr. First-year middle schooler who'd already gone home, popular with the ladies? Kids these days? Was he the protagonist of a light novel? Was that kind of story unfolding at my old middle school?
No. sorry to interrupt you when you're feeling so giggly, but these don't seem to be love letters, and they're all from the same person. Anyway.
All three? Well, if that's what you say. And also, I'm not feeling giggly, but whatever. You shouldn't be grabbing someone's private correspondence. You need to put them back right now. I had to scold her. We hadn't come to my alma mater to infringe on the privacy of middle schoolers.
I dunno. Take a look at these envelopes. They're labeled A, B, and C in big letters on the front, by hand, too. The handwriting seems to belong to one person, but who'd use this kind of lettering on a love letter?
What kind of love lettering would that be? Ogi mumbled. Yes, it did seem off, or rather, odd all the more so, since each letter was written exactly as you'd see it in math class if it were a variable. Now, first year of middle school, that's right around the time you go from arithmetic to mathematics, which meant it was about when you'd start using that kind of notation still, hold on. Still, you shouldn't look at someone's private letters without permission. Listen to me. I don't care if it's for the sake of fieldwork.
But these letters are addressed to you.
Ogi turned the envelopes around, and yes, it said to Koyomi Araragi, 1-3, all three of them. What?
What could we possibly have here? Oh, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
Ogi cried out with an unsettling smirk, and that's when I remembered, like I'd been hit by a bolt of lightning, what Oikuro was trying to say. I remembered, almost to the point of forgetting everything else. How true. It really is such a flimsy thing, human memory, as dodgy as my life itself. The memory I'd recalled was still a chaotic mess, so let me first explain the situation to you. It had led me to visit my alma mater, with all the embarrassment and nostalgia that it entailed. The morning after I escaped from a classroom after being locked in with transfer student Oji Oshino, I walked through the halls on my way to class, when Hanekawa stopped me. Because Sodachi Oikuro was inside, Hanekawa said, because she had come back to school for the first time in 2 years.
You two are on bad terms, right? I just thought it might be better to mentally prepare yourself first.
I could expect no less from a class president among class presidents. Tabasa Hanekawa, the class president of all under heaven. Her thoughtfulness about such matters was impeccable. I'm sure that class council wouldn't have ended the way it did if she'd been the president of Year 1 Class 3. Surely we would have avoided that tragedy. Of course, if she'd been in our class, the true culprit might have been identified on the spot. How might things have gone then? I wouldn't call it the better outcome without any reservations. Every student from that meeting, myself and Senjo Gahara included, kept our mouths shut about what happened. Hanekawa couldn't have known, but it seemed that my differences with Oikuro were well known to begin with. Some people at that meeting even theorized that I brought about her downfall, however much it upset me to hear. Hanekawa didn't take the opportunity to ask me, Araragi, what happened between you and Miss Oikura? Maybe she thought it wasn't a topic she ought to dig into. Even so, it was a pressing matter. If Oikura and I caused some sort of issue in class that was too big to overlook, Hanekawa would interrogate me and Senjo Gahara aggressively too. That'd be no good. I didn't want people knowing about that meeting. I didn't want Hanekawa knowing I of all people had been the chair. Hanekawa being Hanekawa, she wouldn't castigate me if anything. She'd gently admonish me, but I still didn't want to tell her. I didn't want to talk about this lightheartedly, nor for that matter with a heavy heart. In fact, I was kneading myself over the way I'd blabbed on to Ogi the day before, when I hadn't even told Shinobu about what happened 2 years ago, regardless of how necessary it may have been to escape from that locked room. I had to maintain the most peaceful relationship possible with Oikura. Now that she was here, Hanekawa wouldn't launch an investigation if I led a regular trouble-free life. Did I also need to make sure Senjo Gahara kept her mouth shut? Not that I knew how she felt about that incident. She thought about things in a different way than she did back then. Anyway. I let out a strained laugh. Hanekawa, you're worrying too much, it was meant to say, but fell flat. She stood there looking at me like I was this bizarre thing. The kind of look you'd give a friend who started acting crazy. Just how forced was my laugh? It's nothing worth worrying about. Bad turns, maybe, but that's 2 years ago, the distant past. I don't have any concerns. None at all. I appreciate the consideration, but I could have walked straight into that classroom, and nothing would have happened.
Really?
Uh-huh, really. And I'm sure she's forgotten about me too. I guaranteed as Hanekawa seemed to ponder the situation. This, too, fell flat, only making her needlessly suspicious. I venture to say this because of her reply.
Well, Miss Ikura asked me about how you're doing now, what you're doing now, what you're like now.
She super remembered me, and she was super obsessed scarily enough. Suddenly, I didn't want to walk into my classroom anymore. I'd have done a U-turn and headed straight back home if I didn't have to worry about my attendance.
She wanted to know if you'd gotten taller, what you have for lunch, and around what time you get to school.
That's a lot of questions.
I did answer her, of course, as long as they were harmless. I thought it'd be strange if I didn't.
Would you mean harmless?
Stuff everyone knows, like how you're the vice president. How you've gotten your act straight lately. That much.
I didn't tell her about Shinobu, or about aberrations. Of course, Hanekawa assured. Right, that wouldn't be harmless. Afflicting, more like.
Also, I didn't tell her about Miss Senjo Bahara, because the situation seemed somewhat fraught after all. She hasn't come to school yet. I do think you ought to set a goal for her before she does arrive, though.
A goal?
I'm suggesting that you talk to her, your classmates. You can't spend the remaining months together without ever coming in contact. Yes?
Huh. Wow, she saw through my plan of trying to ignore Oikura for the rest of the year? Surely our classroom offered some sort of dead-angled...
I can't have you ruining the mood of the class either. Even if Miss Oikura holds some sort of a grudge, if you're as unconcerned about her as you say, you should be able to meet her halfway.
How could this be happening? She'd used my own words against me. Halfway? If her attitude towards me was the same as 2 years ago, it was all scorched earth. Who knew what kind of minefield I'd be walking into? I've heard some landmines are designed not to deliver lethal wounds and just blow away your legs and make you suffer as much as possible. Hanekawa wanted me to step on it.
But Araragi, wait just a sec, okay? I need to talk to our homeroom teacher about the reinstatement process for Miss Okura at the teacher's room. Would you like to come with me? You're the vice president after all.
Oikura hadn't withdrawn from school, so reinstatement was just a way of speaking. Still, Hanekawa stepping away for a moment provided me with an excellent opportunity, especially if Senjo Gahara hadn't arrived yet. If I went in now, I wouldn't have to mind anyone else. A perfect chance, once in a lifetime. Having to mind only 2 pairs of eyes said something about my life, but didn't make it any less of a rare chance, so I cordially or not. I was in a sense neglecting my duties. I'll resolve everything with Oikura by the time you get back. There's only half a year left until we graduate. I'd like to enjoy my youth, you know?
You've really grown, Araragi.
Hanekawa sounded impressed, but it was a stopgap measure at best, and I had no way of making good on my promise that I'd resolve everything before she returned. I entered the classroom, the empty seat kept open for Oikura. All this time was pretty far from mine, giving me some degree of comfort. Given what Hanekawa had just told me, and even if that wasn't the case, I couldn't ignore Oikura. Still, I assumed I could at least place my bag down at my seat, sit down, and breathe for a moment. The plan was to inspect Oikura while doing this, then come up with a plan based on her attitude and mood. I'd be jumping the gun in a sense, kind of like how people who are quick at doing calculations start thinking about how to solve a problem before they're even done hearing it. Unfortunately, someone called me on my foul. No, that's not accurate, because I didn't even get a chance to execute my so-called plan. Oikura had taken my seat. It didn't matter if Hanekawa told her or not, because really, she could ask anyone where I sat and they'd tell her. It wasn't as if no other former Year 1 Class 3 students were in our class. Well, actually, even if she did ask someone, I doubted she'd ask someone from 1-3. She'd probably avoid them. Oikura would. In any case, I tried to pull off a feint, but she'd gotten the jump on me, or rather, it felt like she'd jumped me, and I had to admit it did feel strange. Yes, Oikura hated me since long ago, but was it to the point that she'd try to pick a fight with me this openly? You could almost call it an attack. How was it any different from physical violence? She seemed to be challenging me to battle. I considered answering this declaration of war by going over to her seat, the one that had always been empty, and sitting in it, but allowing myself to be provoked would only drag me into a quagmire. On second thought, it was times like these that called on me to be a cool and collected gentleman. I calmly walked with the most graceful of steps toward my seat and Oikura like a movie star on the red carpet, or perhaps a bride down the wedding aisle. You can tell by my nonsense metaphors that I was in fact quite shaken, but in any case... Hey, you know that's my seat. Calmly. As calmly as possible. Hold on. Aren't you, Oikura? That's right, you're Aikura. Whoa, what a surprise. Hoikura, my old classmate from when I was a first year, 2 whole years in the past. I wonder if you remember me. You've probably forgotten me, but you know, number 2 Araragi. Number 2. My entire profile consisted of my roll call number. And, while I meant for this self-introduction to cleverly imply that yes, how much? I know that's how little I'm worth to you, she only replied in a low voice.
I remember. Of course I do.
Not just a low voice, the lowest. The kind of voice that might arise from the lowest depths of hell over the past 6 months. I'd faced countless crises, squared off against no shortage of dangerous characters, and could say without exaggeration that I'd been pushed to the brink of death again and again. But this voice made me want to flinch. All my experience meant nothing. What exactly had she gone through?
How could I ever forget you, Araragi?
Okura let out my name with so much hatred that I bet she'd speak the devil's name with more cheer in comparison. She more spit it out than let it out, leaving no room whatsoever for compromise. This wasn't scorched earth. This was like a barrier. Or maybe just a deep ravine. I'm glad you remember me. Yes, that makes me Araragi. Roll call number 2. Happy? I said as I observed Oikura, whom I was seeing for the first time in 2 years. She seemed to have grown, though that seems obvious enough. She'd gone from being a first-year high school student to a third-year high school student. Her details were a little more childish in my memories, but that seemed to have disappeared entirely. As far as changes, though, the most prominent of all was her gaze. The gaze she summoned to glare at me. Her gaze, now even sharper than 2 years ago, it seemed to have a keener edge to it. Unless her eyesight had gotten worse from spending the past 2 years playing too many video games, her hatred and revulsion for me must have grown the entire time. Negative growth, as they say. More than her body had grown, which was fine, but why would her hatred toward me grow? It's not like we'd been meeting or anything. So, you're sitting in my seat, I repeated patiently. Don't ever get impatient when you're dealing with wild beasts. Fall into agitation or panic, and you doom yourself to be eaten. Most important of all, remain unshaken and unperturbed before a predator.
You seem to be doing well, unlike me,
The predator said, ignoring my words. She offered a meager smile, kindly teaching me that smiling isn't always a sign of good intentions.
Of course, my life is a total mess thanks to you.
Thanks to me? I didn't know what she meant. Was she talking about the class council meeting? No. How did that make sense? Sure. Oikura stopped coming to school, and that might have made a total mess of her life. But the unanimous opinion was that she'd caused her own downfall. She'd reaped what she sowed, and shouldn't be holding a grudge against anyone. Don't tell me she believed the theory that I'd intentionally brought her low. Did she even think that I was the true culprit? How ridiculous, I thought, but it belonged to the realm of possibility. This was, after all, about what someone believed, and anyone is free to believe anything. A solo majority vote always ends in a unanimous decision. If Oikura thought I was the culprit, I was the culprit. If Oikura thought I caused her downfall, I had to accept that fact.
Looks like you're leading a happy life,
She continued. I noticed there was something unnatural about the way she spoke. A weak vibrato, like she wasn't too used to talking, as if she didn't have full control over the volume of her voice. She hadn't come to school for 2 years, and perhaps hadn't talked to anyone in a while. In that case, saying anything too stimulating was unwise, though it was hard to say at this point what would constitute a wise move. I guess neither wisdom nor moves had been a big part of her life for some time. I began to regret not going to the teacher's room with Hanakawa, but as it always is with regret, I was too late.
I'm so jealous. You were studying, trying to get into college, and finding a girlfriend while I shut myself in at home. It's all been smooth sailing for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, thanks, I said, the most I could muster in reply. It seemed she'd asked more than just Hanakawa about me studying, was one thing, but Hanakawa wouldn't babble about me wanting to go to college and other private stuff. She told me she'd left out Senjo Gahara, but it wasn't as if our relationship was a secret. Someone else must have brought it up. It didn't take a masterful investigation, but there was something unhealthy about Oikura, something extremely sick. She'd come back to school after 2 years, and the first thing she did was ask everyone about me. Didn't she worry about the kind of impression it gave? Going around and asking about Koyomi Araragi. In fact, her eccentric behavior bothered Hanakawa to the point that she decided to caution me in advance. Not that I didn't seem to be making an active mockery of her advice. Oikura was a pretty harsh person 2 years ago, not easy to get along with, but I didn't recall her being this poor of a communicator, this incapable of managing her relationships with others. Had that incident changed her, after all? Or perhaps set her down a rather distorted path, twisted and turning.
Thanks? did I do for you? It's not like I was here at school.
No, I meant. Now she wanted to nitpick my empty platitudes? Not to mention, it felt more like her nails digging into me than her picking nits.
I'm sure you could get into any college you want if you felt like it.
I wouldn't say that. I'm in a real rough spot. I shrugged and replied jokingly to her words soaked in no, dripping with sarcasm. The real rough spot I found myself in was keeping the mood from growing dark, not that my efforts were paying off. It went beyond me. The air in the entire room felt suffocating. I almost wondered if the oxygen around us had been replaced with precious metals. Not one student in class chatted away. They all seemed to be focused on us. My reputation was going to take yet another hit. I was doing all the right things, and yet my reputation was going to take yet another. Any 17 was going to take yet another hit.
No need to be modest. You're still good at math, aren't you?
Oikura said this sneeringly. The snide remark seemed to be no motive and all malice.
You must think ruler suits you better than it does me.
There was something laughable about the way she fixated on this point, and it seemed even dumber when that piercing glare accompanied it, if you want to know what the object of that piercing glare thought. Well, I guess you could say I'm good at math. Or more, that it's my one lifeline.
Still getting perfect score after perfect score?
No, as far as my scores. I couldn't say it. That of all subjects, I'd never gotten a perfect score in math since that day I had the experience lately in other subjects. Math was the only one where I couldn't make it happen. Or shouldn't. A compulsion coming from somewhere. From somewhere? No, I knew where. It came from right here.
And you have a girlfriend now? That must be thanks to math too.
No, that's a bit of a stretch. At the same time, I realized that while Ikura's questioning may have turned up, the fact that I had a girlfriend, she didn't seem to have learned it was Senjogahara. Because Ikura wouldn't have let that go if she'd known. How could she ignore the news that Koyomi Araragi had captured the heart of Hitagi Senjogahara, the cloistered princess, the flower in a bell jar? What a stroke of luck. Perhaps whoever told Oikura that I had a girlfriend sensed something disquieting, either from the start or as they spoke disquieting, or some sort of unusual vibe. In that case, I resolved anew. I at least needed to get her out of my seat before Senjogahara got to school. But ultimately, it's not as if my mere resolve meant anything.
Tits off thanks to math. Bunks like you really grind my gears. I could have all the resentment in the world and it still wouldn't be enough. My hatred for you just keeps on bubbling up whether I wanted to or not. A bottomless spring of disgust.
Punks like me? Gosh, that's a little extreme. I attempted to mollify the now openly hostile Oikura. To keep us on a peaceful, or at least conciliatory path yet, she only kept her sights trained on me. In fact, her expression grew even harsher.
I hate you.
The same words I'd heard in that classroom 2 years ago.
I hate that attitude of yours wrapping everything up in a nice non-committal way. You try to compromise to smooth everything over, just like back then, when...
She said before gulping her words. No, it seemed more like she'd lost them when they got stuck in her throat. This girl who hadn't done much speaking in a while had apparently messed her throat up by suddenly taking a furious tone. In fact, she had a mild coughing fit. I approached her, concerned, but...
Don't touch me.
This is what it meant for someone to be brusque.
I don't want someone like you worrying about me. What good could possibly come out of that?
Is that so? I stepped away, as requested. I got to thinking. Just like back then, when Oikura had said. Back then naturally meant when I was a first year. Did she mean the way I tried to bring the meeting to an inconclusive end? Speaking of, she reached the decision to take a majority vote after learning of my stance. A decision, or maybe a boiling point. Maybe she felt some kind of unjustified resentment over it. Unjustified from my point of view, of course, while she surely saw it as a legitimate grudge. Spending 2 whole years keenly aware of her grudge would explain the way she glared at me now. It was unreasonable, but not unjustified.
I hate you. I hate you, okay?
She went on, like some firebrand trying to win over a crowd like a dam had burst, spilling out words. Her own words lit a flame in her, drove her into a frenzy.
I don't even want to see your face. The fact that you exist in this world at all is disgusting.
That bad? You have no choice but to go on the defensive when someone attacks you to that degree. I felt my emotions cooling off. Faced with a wild beast, I effortlessly fell into a state of calm serenity. Settled into, more like, Her rant was appalling and left me cold, but it was also fear, a cold sensation in my guts over not knowing what to do, or what she might do. She was comical in a way, hating me to this extent, so it was possible to see her as foolish, but I couldn't laugh at her so easily. Even if I did, it'd surely be forced. Just like Oikura's agitation, my laugh would be peculiar. Seems like you really hate happy people. I wanted to ask her why she bothered coming to school if she didn't want to see my face, but that was like telling her to go home after she'd finally decided otherwise, after her long absence. Instead, I tried to evade her attacks by generalizing. But no, she shook her head, as if I said the stupidest things.
I like happy people.
Right, she'd refute anything I said at this point. She'd say left if I said right, down if I said up, but she seemed to mean it.
Seeing them makes me happy. What I hate are people who don't know why they're happy. People who don't even try to consider why they're happy. I hate water that thinks it made itself boil. I hate seasons that think they came about naturally. I hate the sun for thinking it rises all on its own. I hate it! I hate it! I hate it! I hate you!
Okura's eyes glowed, like they were aflame, like they were inflamed. I had no idea anything could glow in such a disgusting way.
I hate it! Hate it! Hate it! Hate it! Hate it! I hate everything! I hate it! No exceptions! I hate it! No take-backs! I hate it! I hate it! I hate the hate! Oh, hate that hates hate! Because hating hate hates hate!
Oikura. Oh, crap, I thought I was wrong. Totally wrong. It was the kind of mistake you make when you're being attacked. You're the underdog being viciously harassed by someone with an advantage over you. If you don't strike back, if you don't stand strong, you're going to let yourself be mauled now. Maybe mistake is an overstatement. I'd be beaten into submission if I didn't strike back and stand strong. Oikura was certainly being hostile toward me. Her attitude was threatening and aggressive, but even if it meant getting beaten into submission, it should have been unthinkable for me to strike back at her. It'd be a different story if this was the Oikura from 2 years ago, but I couldn't now. Now she was fragile. Almost like a piece of glass. If I tried to strike back and defend myself in the wrong way, the slightest nudge from my hand could shatter her into 1,000 pieces. Who knows what would have happened if I dared tell her to go home? What could I do or say to someone coming after me in such a perilous emotional state? Even the way she took my seat, for starters, might have been more defensive than offensive, a way to protect herself and her mind. She lacked any and all equilibrium. I felt, well, awful. She'd been so cool and commanding, but now appeared this weak and frail. I'd have preferred the return of a more aggressive Oikura. A former foe returns, but weakened. Who wants to watch a drama like that? She was no wild beast. She was like a scared little animal. If anything, it was Oikura who saw me as a ferocious wild beast. The predator, touching her would leave me hurt, but shatter her. This difference in power forced me to go easy on her.
Why aren't you talking? Don't tell me you're feeling sympathetic, Araragi. You feel sympathy from me? Your sympathy isn't worth a cent to equals.
Hold on, Oikura. Hold on. Calm down. I'll leave for a bit, okay? Cool your head while I'm gone. You can keep on sitting in that seat. My attitude only seemed to irritate Oikura. She stood up indignantly. The way she stood, the moment I said it was okay to sit, was in a sense consistent, but this was no time to be impressed.
Araragi, you don't know anything. You act like you do as you live your comfortable little life, not even considering why you're happy. You don't know, you've forgotten. College exams, girlfriends. Don't give me that crap.
Again, Oikura. I didn't think I was giving her crap, but nothing would come out of arguing here. Perhaps the biggest load of crap to her was when I tried to act serious. Not to mention, it's a terrible idea to contradict someone who's emotionally off balance. I had to affirm everything coming out of her mouth, just as she denied everything coming from mine. Or so I thought, but she wasn't even letting me affirm her, or speak in the first place. She interrupted me as I tried, endlessly unfurling her pet theories and personal opinions before I could so much as nod.
It's because people like you are in power that I'm never going to be saved. I hate people who think they're the only ones responsible for the way they live, who think they can live all on their own. I hate people who flatter themselves by thinking they can make it on their own if it really came down to it. People with the nerve to say they don't need anyone's help. You can never be happy unless someone saves you. I hate idiots who don't even realize that. I hate them so much it's killing me.
What had driven her to this point? That class council meeting? The 2 years of depression that followed? Or something else I wasn't aware of? I agree, it's important for people to help each other out. Yeah, Oikura, you're right, people never go and get saved on their own. Definitely not. I'm always thinking the same thing. Those ungrateful people who think they're on their own are unforgivable. I'm probably not cut out for flattery. To think that going along with someone's opinion could be this hard. But permit me to make the bare minimum of an excuse. No, one could stay on the same page as
You're the unforgivable one, Araragi. No one is more ungrateful than you. You're complacent, I mean. What about your idea of justice?
Justice?
Or are you telling me you don't remember what was inside that shoe cupboard during our first year of middle school?
What was inside the shoe cupboard? The words came from nowhere. It felt like the flow of our conversation had been interrupted. What was inside that shoe cupboard during our first year of middle school? What was that supposed to mean? I couldn't figure out what the words meant beyond a literal level at all. Oikura looked almost triumphant when she noticed my bewilderment.
See? I knew it. You don't remember a thing. You don't know what you're made up of.
What I'm made up of? I didn't know. Why did the words strike so hard, pierce my heart even, and come out the other side? Oikura, what do you mean by oh?
Nothing, because I hate meaning. I hate everything. I hate and I hate the hate and hate and hate it.
Now, this was going too far. Though I'd unfortunately seen people in her state multiple times, and while I knew it was better to just let it all come out, we were in a classroom with all these pairs of eyes surrounding us. I could end a little quarrel or argument by saying I was in the wrong. No matter how it unfolded, my reputation be damned. But this kind of fierce, almost panicked paroxysm would ruin Ikura's reputation. How could it not? Our class already had preconceived notions of her, the way she'd come to school out of nowhere after being absent for all this time. Sadachi Oikura. I needed to find some way to calm her down. The thought drove me to hold her shoulders as if I were supporting her. I tried to shake her and speak to her with whatever words came to mind. But before I could say anything, not that I knew what to say, and the only correct course of action might have been to sprint away at full speed, Oikura screamed.
I told you, don't touch me.
She sounded like a child, and acted in the thoughtless manner of a child. Atop the desk Oikura occupied, my desk sat a ballpoint pen. An extra fine ballpoint pen. I didn't know why it was there. The only explanation seemed to be that someone just so happened to place it there, and true, it was the kind of ballpoint pen you might find sitting around anywhere in a school. Oikura grabbed it and swung it at my hand, which was on her shoulder. Meh? Well, I wasn't trying to act tough or anything. Why do that in front of Oikura now? But if I'm being honest, I think I could have dodged it. It was a ballpoint pen swung by a high school girl, and a diminished one at that, after the fierce battles I'd experienced over the past 6 months, and yet its tip pierced the back of my hand. It didn't make it out the other side, stopping when it hit the knuckle of my middle finger, which gave me some comfort. Had the tip fully penetrated my hand and stabbed into Ikura's shoulder, there'd have been no point in choosing not to avoid it. I can say this with confidence. Had I let go of Ikura's shoulder and evaded the pen, she'd have stabbed her own shoulder with it. So thoughtless, spontaneous, and reflexive was her act. It actually helped her regain some degree of her senses.
Oh.
Still, I wasn't in a place where I could attend to her. I had to hide the wound as soon as possible for 2 reasons. The first, of course, concerned Ikura's future. She'd performed the brutal act out in the open, but our classmates had been watching our argument from a distance. They should buy that she never stabbed me, that she stopped just short if I hid the wound. Well, could buy it. The other reason was extremely self-serving. The wound would heal in no time at all due to the vampiric after effects lingering in my body. It'd be a problem if they saw it healing. I never imagined I'd sustain this kind of damage in a place of learning, but whatever the case, I really needed to get away from here. Now, while Ikura sat dumbstruck. Then, hiding the back of my hand, I spun, but had to stop my feet from moving. I had to stop them or they just stopped. Not just my legs, every one of my actions. My escape and thought processes. Because her form came into sight, the form of Hitagi Senjogahara as she opened the door and entered the classroom. From there, with the flat effect she once carried herself with a flatter effect than ever before, Senjogahara looked at my hand, pierced by the pen, as well as Oikura. What now? Upon further inspection, a body resembling Hanekawa's clung to Senjogahara around her hips, and looked exhausted, a fairly rare state to see the class president in. But the sight of her gave me more or less of an idea of what had happened. In other words, what took place somewhere else before Hitadi Senjogahara and Tsubasa Hanekawa's arrival. After we parted ways, Hanekawa must have conducted whatever procedures were needed to reinstate in Tokurashin_Mark Oikura in the teacher's room, and while I have no way of being sure whether it happened before or after she finished her business there, she had a chance encounter with Senjogahara, who arrived at school. More of an ill-fated encounter considering Hanekawa's current state, but in any case, she must have told Senjogahara about Oikura coming to school. Naturally, Hanekawa at least knew that Oikura and Senjogahara were once classmates, and maybe the conversation even led to her stating that Oikura and I were meeting now. Hanekawa wouldn't have said this with any sort of urgency, but from the point of view of Senjogahara, who knew of the differences between me and Oikura on a deeper, closer level than her, it had sounded like a notice of quite the storm brewing. And she'd sped to the classroom like the wind dragging Hanekawa along. It seemed her legs were every bit as powerful as when she was the star of the track team, or maybe she'd built them back up to that level? In any case, Senjogahara and Hanekawa appeared in the classroom at the worst possible moment.
You're fucking dead.
I'd like you to note that the words came from her after she seemed to have turned a new leaf. It threatened to undo all her work until now, but she was just that full of quiet fury.
Oh yeah, I'm allowed to stab Araragi with stationery. No matter how much of that character I've abandoned, I won't stand for any reuse of it.
That's what you're mad about? Be mad that your boyfriend got stabbed?
Miss Senjogahara, please, why?
In spite of her ragged state, Hanekawa did a laudable job trying to fulfill her duty as both class president and friend. But, regrettably, she lacked the physical strength. Senjogahara walked straight toward us, ready to throw herself straight into a sea of mines.
Miss Senjogahara.
And then, Akira noticed her former classmate. As president and leader of Year 1 Class 3, Akira had to remember a classmate as distinctive as Hitadi Senjogahara, the weekly honors student. I had no idea what kind of relationship Senjogahara, once considered untouchable, used to have with Oikura, but whatever friendly relations they may have once had, even if they'd been the closest and best of friends, weren't about to resume now. The air was just that tense. On Senjogahara's side, of course, and on Oikura's as well.
Oh, so that's how it is. I get it now. You're going out with Araragi. How far you fallen?
This actually had the effect of bringing Senjogahara back to her senses. As someone with crisis management abilities and observational skills far superior to mine, she must have instantly recognized Sodachi Aikura's mental and emotional state. She recognized the danger, the fragility there, an aggression built upon weakness that permitted no counterattack. The old Senjogahara would have surely gone right ahead and opposed Oikura, but...
Miss Hanekawa, it's fine. You can let go of me. I'm sorry. It was nothing.
Are you sure?
asked Hanekawa, having been dragged all this way, as she moved away from her hips, the most right-minded, good-hearted person here. She had drawn the short straw.
It's fine. Thank you. I'm always grateful for your self-sacrificing friendship.
You're very welcome.
As a show of gratitude, I'll be your hug pillow one of these days.
I don't know about saying that at school, Miss Senjogahara.
I promptly hid my stabbed hand behind my back. Hanekawa gave me a questioning look, but even in her exhausted state she wisely decided that now was not the time and returned her gaze to Senjogahara, Oikura, and the tense situation between them. It almost seemed like a face-off between the two stationary girls, new and old, but Senjogahara was already somewhat relaxed. This, however, seemed only to goad Oikura. Of course she hated everything now. Was there anything that wouldn't goad her on?
What do you mean, it's nothing? Are you saying that I'm nothing? Just look at how great you're doing now. You used to be a useless, sick girl who couldn't do a thing unless I took care of you.
You seem terribly busy holding me up and bringing me down, Miss Oikura. But yes, it's true that you did a lot for me. You never punched down.
It brought me back. But her affect, or lack thereof, seemed somewhat strained. She was puffing herself up in a way when she didn't need to, and it was to maintain some kind of balance with Oikura.
Not that you have the capacity for kindness towards anyone now, sick or not.
So are you better, Miss Senjogahara?
Yes. Thank you.
This thank you seemed to irritate Oikura once again, I'd given her my own empty thanks, but apparently she hated hearing the words.
Did Araragi decide to apply for college because you've been looking after him? If that's the case, you ought to stop. It's pointless. He's never gonna appreciate it no matter what you do for him. He thinks he lives his life all on his own. No matter how much you do, he's going to keep on thinking that he did it all thanks to himself.
Well, you might be right.
Hey now. Don't just accept it, I thought, but like me, Senjo Gahara must have felt that contradicting Okura now was a bad idea. Maybe what looked to be a solid discussion had already collapsed, and the issue at hand was how to bring this situation to an end. A way to lower the curtain. Ultimately, the only way was to tear the curtain to shreds, notwithstanding Hanekawa's presence. I shuddered with fear when I thought about all that implied.
But really it doesn't matter. It's not like I'm seeking a reward. What I want is for Araragi to attend college with me, so I'm not going to hope for anything beyond that.
The ironclad assumption was that she would get in. She could talk this way because she was all but guaranteed recommendation-based admission, and something or other, possibly the part about not seeking a reward, ticked off Oikura. She flew off the handle yet again, and sent her palm flying towards Senjo Gahara. Fortunately, there was no stationery nearby, fortunately for Oikura, I mean, because Senjo Gahara's counterattack would have surely involved that piece of stationery. Devastating in her hands, even an eraser dealt more damage than the strike she did deliver in return with her fist. Meh? The entire class fell silent. I, who was too late to stop them, and Hanekawa, who foolishly believed Senjo Gahara and let go of her, and our classmates, who watched at a distance, and of course the clobbered Oikura. She crumpled to the floor and didn't get up. While you might call this the rare example of rock earning a win over paper, Senjo Gahara, the winner despite being as expressionless as she had been in her old days, looked like she knew she'd done something wrong. Well, yeah. You can't rock someone with a punch like that.
Araragi, I'm gonna pass out too, so please take care of the rest.
What? Before I could finish reacting, she fainted on the spot like an anemic student passing out during morning assembly as the principal gave one of his long sermons, with an even more dramatic noise than when Oikura collapsed. And she'd fallen completely unconscious, not so much as breaking her fall. It was such an impressive display of playing dead that even I had trouble telling if it was real. Was she a ladybug or something? And with this, the early morning commotion came to a shocking end, with two girls pitifully splayed on the floor. In other words, Hanekawa, the class president, and I, the vice president, had been left to handle the aftermath, but I'll skip over what happened next. As a true devotee of Tsubasa Hanekawa, I don't want to have to depict her swamped and exhausted. With the flashback over, we'll move back into the present. In other words, after school, visiting the shoe cupboards of my dear old alma mater, public middle school number 701, in order to learn the truth about Oikura's weird remark. Wait, what? That's strange. How does that flashback explain why you're here at this middle school with me, Yogi?
Oh, you! What are you talking about? You know, you always say the funniest today, and that's when you told me about yesterday, and that's when you told me about this, remember? And then my humble self presumptuously proposed that you try visiting your former middle school. I couldn't simply ignore what came from a proposal I made, which is why I am accompanying you. However pushy I realize that may be.
Who knows, maybe I might be able to help you in some way by being here, Oji said. That's what happened? Really? But, well, I couldn't think of a particular reason for her to lie, so it was probably true. How careless of me, I'd rushed to tell someone about my battle with Oikura. Maybe I'd started to open my heart up to Oji after being trapped alongside her the day before. If so, Koyomi Araragi was being quite sociable toward a transfer student he'd only met a day ago. Not that it was a change for the worse. With my doubts fully dispelled, I turned my attention to the 3 envelopes addressed to me that had been in my former shoe cupboard. 3 letters to me in a middle school shoebox I hadn't used for nearly 3 years since graduating. The situation was already out of the ordinary at that point, but there were also the letters on each envelope. The letters A, B, and C written by hand had shaken my psyche to the core. Sadachi Oikura. They reminded me of her rant. The 3 alphabetic marks made me recall something I'd forgotten.
What could this mean? Oh, I just can't figure it out. I'm sure these letters are to you. But why send 3 letters at once to the same person? Oh, what a mystery there is. That classic masterpiece of detective fiction that gets brought up all the time, the purloined letters. It would be interesting if they were advance notices of a crime, though.
You don't have to stretch the situation to make it sound like a mystery, or to bring up what you call an over-referenced story yet again. Yes, I remembered now. I remembered that much. How I acted next, faced with another set of 3 letters 5 years ago. Ogi, it's not complicated. We just have to open the envelopes to solve this mystery.
Really? Then let's take a look.
Ogi said, unsealing one of them. She was as unhesitant as ever, but when I say she unsealed one, I don't mean she ripped it open. It was kind of girlish, the way she carefully peeled it open. I won't say that I did rip them open 5 years ago, but I must have been a little rougher. Anyway, she opened the envelope. Ogi tilted her head as she looked at the piece of paper inside. She didn't need to show me, it must have read. The B envelope is the wrong one. We'll switch your choice to the C envelope? Yes, how could I forget? Down to the details of the phrasing, every last part of speech. If anything, I couldn't figure out how I'd forgotten it all until now.
What does this mean? I don't have a clue. It doesn't make any sense. Is this some kind of code?
It's more of a quiz than a code.
Why would you say that when you haven't even looked at it?
Ogi handed me the note. It read exactly as I thought it would, and the childish handwriting was also just as I imagined. If someone told me it was the actual letter I'd received 5 years ago, I'd almost believe it, but that couldn't be. How could a letter from 5 years ago be here? But then, where had I put the letter? The letter that changed my life when I received it. Where had it disappeared to? Why had I lost it?
Your expression says that you expected this, but what about it is a quiz? It talks about switching to the C envelope, but I don't know what it means for B to be the wrong one to begin with.
This is a famous puzzle known as the Monty Hall problem, a game of probability that any math enthusiast has come across. Giving Ogi the same explanation I once received.
The Monty Hole problem? Huh? Something to do with astronomy? Like black holes and white holes?
No, Monty Hall. It's the name of a television program and doesn't have anything to do with the actual question. It's one of many probability problems with an answer at odds with your intuition.
At odds with your intuition, like a paradox.
I guess you could say that, but it's not technically a paradox. Nothing about the answer contradicts reality. The Monty Hall problem. There are 3 doors, A, B, and C, and a fabulous prize is hidden behind one. The player first chooses one door out of the 3. After the door is chosen, the host of the program opens one of the other 2 doors. It's the wrong door, and the player learns this fact. Given this information, the player is allowed the opportunity to choose a second time stay with the door you picked, or switch and pick the remaining door. That is the puzzle, in a nutshell. Ogi nodded. As a good listener and someone with good comprehension, she now had a rough understanding of the game, I assumed. At the same time, there was also a slight sense of so what about her. Perhaps she wondered what about this game was so exciting. So, to encourage her. What do you think? Just as I once was.
What do I think? Well, I understand that the letter inside envelope A is imitating this puzzle.
What would you do, Ogi? You picked envelope and now you've been told that envelope B is wrong. Will you switch your choice to C? Yes, the answer that puts her right in the asker's trap, but also the answer that anyone, including myself 5 years ago, would give at first without a significant background in mathematics.
If you don't find out the answer until later, and only one of A, B, and C is the right choice, then each one has a 1/3 chance of being right. It'd be a different story if you found out that B was wrong before you made your first choice, of course.
Yes, but changing your answer here is the right choice, switching from A to C.
Is that really true?
Asked Ogi politely. Her curiosity didn't seem particularly piqued. And, well, the concept behind the question gets a little confusing when you start talking about shifting probabilities, boring anyone who was never interested. It greatly piqued my curiosity 5 years ago, but it was a bit unfair to expect the same kind of excitement from Ogi.
Why does that happen? I should like to know. Won't you tell me?
She said, sounding like she didn't really care. Her consideration made me happy, but I wished she'd be a little more considerate with her consideration. While it hurt to be acting like a math nerd giving a fiery lecture to a bored audience, I had to if I were to connect the topic to the 3 envelopes. I pretended not to notice OG's listlessness. Acting like I wasn't sensitive required some sensitivity. The most popular explanation is to ask you to imagine this problem with 100 doors, not 3. Choose one door out of those 100 that you think the fabulous prize sits behind.
Okay, Chosen. Now what?
Of the remaining 99 doors, 98 are opened and shown to be wrong. You don't know if the one remaining door is right or not, but what would you do if you were allowed to change your selection?
That case.
Ogi said pensively, looking at the shoe cupboard. Perhaps she was overlaying a mental illustration of the Monty Hall problem on top of the long row of boxes, something I didn't have the quick wit to do in the past. Whether or not she had an interest in math, Ogi did seem to have a nimble mind in general. If only one of the boxes is the right answer and you chose one, and then you were left with only one other option, shown that all the rest were wrong.
Well, I guess I'd change my pick in that case.
Right?
But you changed the problem.
She made her dissatisfaction clear. She wasn't buying my explanation. Of course I did expect this to some extent. Picking one door out of 3 and having one of the other doors disappear doesn't seem like the same problem as picking one door out of 100 and having 98 of the others disappear. Well, yeah. It's obvious in this case that the one final option, the survivor of 199th odds, seems more correct than the 100th choice you first made. But it's hard to go from that and successfully appeal to someone's impression that the same goes with 3 doors for the same reason, naturally, because the problem has to do with math, not impressions. Then let's go with the solution that I heard. I decided to back down and try another approach. Sometimes a detour can prove to be a shortcut. It seemed to be the quickest way. The shortest path isn't always the most expedient one. First, let's think about if A is the right answer. In this case, switch choices and you'll always be wrong. It doesn't matter whether the game show host opens door B or C, the player is guaranteed to lose by changing doors. Therefore, not switching is the right move therefore. It's better not to switch if A is the correct answer, right?
Yes, I get that.
Then, let's think about it when B is the right answer. The host has no choice but to open door C if the player has chosen A, one of the 2 incorrect doors. In other words, the player only has 2 choices, A or B. Switch, and you're right. Don't switch, and you're wrong, so it's better to switch if the answer is B.
I see. Well, I get that too.
Finally, when C is the right answer, this follows the same pattern as when the answer is B. Given that the player has chosen A and the right answer is C, the host can only open door B. This gives you the 2 options of A or C, where not switching is wrong and switching is right, making it better for you to switch.
It does.
Imagine the paths toward getting the answer right for all 3 cases, A, B, and C. There are 2 cases where switching is better, and one where switching leaves you worse off. In other words, not switching gives you a 1/3 chance of getting it right, while there's a 2/3 chance that switching is beneficial. And of course the calculations are the same if the player picks door B or door C, which is why the optimal action for the player to take in the Monty Hall problem is to change their selection. This proof left my first-year middle schooler self in shock, but while I wouldn't call OG's reaction apathetic, it was still on the level of, "Oh, okay, I understand." So it didn't leave a high schooler stunned. Yes, maybe these kinds of math problems hit hardest when you're in late elementary to middle school. In that case, I'd encountered it at the right time. Well, maybe not encountered. I was introduced to it, taught it, by the individual who had left 3 envelopes in my shoebox.
This is kind of an aside, but did this TV show know this when they ran the game? Was it a program meant to amuse viewers by letting them watch players be fooled by their human instincts into being unable to pick the optimal solution?
No, apparently not. It seems like no one thought a player could double their chances until it was pointed out in a magazine, not the staff working on the show or its viewers. I guess you could say that's weird. It really was weird. Why else would someone come up with a game involving such odd mechanics if they thought that your chances stayed the same? How would the game be any different from just choosing one door out of the 3? Even if it was meant as a kind of countdown, it seemed so meaningless. It had become a famous question, the Monty Hall problem, precisely because someone had shown its solution to be so counterintuitive, But the problem existing in the first place felt like some sort of nauseating inversion of ends and means, almost like if aberrations existed prior to aberrational phenomena. As if children existed before their parents, and that's what was truly weird about it. How had the creator of the problem come up with the game?
Well, I guess it's suggestive.
What's suggestive of what?
Oh, nothing. I'm just talking to myself for now. No need to worry, we're not going to get to that for a while, so to summarize and apply this to the envelopes, you're saying that it's the right answer to change our selection from the first envelope I opened to C.
But I already did open the A envelope, didn't I? Ogi pointed out mercilessly. I wished she'd overlooked the fact. These 3 envelopes weren't some kind of project put together by a TV show. That wasn't who sent them. The person who did, through my shoe locker, was a first-year middle schooler at the time, like me.
In that case, let's open the C envelope. Let's play right into expectations. And what's this? A map? There seems to be some kind of marking on the map, too.
Ogi said in an overly explanatory style. She didn't delay opening the C envelope for a single moment once she knew it was the right answer. Though I wasn't fully on board with it, I could learn something from her drive. Had I possessed half of her drive during that morning's commotion, it never would have ended in that awful way. I'd have been able to stop Ikura, or if not her, then Senjogahara.
In other words, we should go to the place shown on the map. It doesn't seem awfully far. This isn't a treasure map, is it? And by the way, what was in the B envelope? Let's take a look.
Ogi briskly opened the B envelope as well. What drive? She had no intention of playing by the rules, or rather, she was playing by an entirely different set of them. Firm rules, rules that made any others just about meaningless.
Oh, this envelope was empty from the start. Does that mean it's the wrong choice? The Monty Hall problem. But this entire chain of events only worked out because we opened the A envelope first. Wouldn't it not make any sense if I'd started by opening the B or C envelope?
Well, yeah, but it was unlikely that you would. If you have 3 envelopes marked a B and C, most people are going to start by opening A.
Is that so? Yes, I see. What a clever grasp of human psychology. And look at me, I went and sided right with the majority. It seems that whoever placed these letters in your shoebox had a lot of confidence in their own intellect. Though I don't see the sender's name on either side of the envelopes.
So, naturally, Ogi continued.
We're going to the place shown on the map next to Journey Tracing Your Memories. We're on a tour, tracking a young Araragi's footsteps.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, we could just cancel the tour then and there, now that I remembered most of everything that had happened. In other words, I could tell Ogi that our journey had come to an end, and perhaps that would have been the right thing to do, as her senior I'd made her tag along for my sake. But I couldn't stand not going, not after coming this far. Going there, going to the place that a young Araragi frequented every single day one summer, I had to go. Let's, Ogi. To the coordinates shown on that map. Wait. What? I found myself saying again, because at some point she disappeared from in front of the shoe cupboard, no doubt acting before waiting to hear my reply. Come on, give me a break. Cutting short my attempt to look cool. Just how aggressive could one person be? And why bother checking with me if she was just going ahead with it? What was she doing ditching her travel companion? Even if we were at my alma mater. All this ran through my mind as I chased after Ogi. She might already be past the school gates with that drive of hers, I thought. But I didn't have to exhaust myself going after her. She'd stopped only a little ahead of me. Had she decided to wait on me and my slow decision-making abilities? She stood at the shoe cupboard corner for the second years, vacantly staring at one of the labels. Sorry to make you wait. I apologized. She'd been the one to go ahead without asking, but I wasn't about to criticize her for that.
Oh no, it's fine, you fool. Don't you worry,
answered Ogi before starting to walk again. I'd gotten pretty used to the way she called me a fool, but it did surprise me when it came out of nowhere. I passed my eyes over the nearby boxes and found Sengoku's name on one. Well, of course, she'd have one since she was a student here, but, It kind of seemed like Ogi had been staring at this particular one. Was I imagining things? Obi and I followed the map contained inside envelope to arrive at what might be called a flag lot in a new housing development not far from public middle school number 701. Standing there, surrounded on all four sides by homes, was a dilapidated house, so perhaps it would be more accurate to say it was crumbling there, not standing there in botanical terms. It seemed withered. Yet this derelict building was the exact place frequented by first-year middle schooler Koyomi Araragi.
Could this be like the abandoned former cram school that I hear my uncle used as his bedroom while he stayed in this town?
Yeah, I guess so. True. This secluded rundown home did bring to mind that no longer standing building. You could even say the two places were just about as deeply memorable to me. But, that said, I went to that abandoned building so many times to visit Oshino, to give blood to Shinobu, so why hadn't I ever thought about this place? It seemed completely reasonable to make the association at least once. I couldn't help but be puzzled. Now, Akira's words made sense. She hated water that thinks it made itself boil. She hated people who don't know why they're happy. Ungrateful people who live their happy little lives. Now I understood. She was exactly right, neither more nor less. It wasn't any exaggeration to say that by completely forgetting about this dilapidated place, I'd forgotten why I was me. It was like carrying on with my life having forgotten the name of my parents. How embarrassing, no. How shameful. Was this what Ogi meant moments ago by suggestive? Aberrations existing before aberrational phenomena, but as far as she was concerned,
It's so run down, it's dangerous. It's at the mercy of the elements and not even being maintained. I'm a germaphobe, unlike my uncle, so I could never live in a place like this. You've got to be kidding me.
she didn't hesitate to slander wholesale a place that held a treasured spot in my memories. I'd be lying to say it didn't offend me, but how convincing would a scolding be from someone who'd forgotten about it until just moments ago? It'd be brazen, transparent, and shameless. Not to mention, unlike her uncle, Oji was young and innocent. Only natural for her to dislike a place like this. I spoke, recalling the figure of that girl. I used to meet a girl in this deserted place.
Why would you do that?
While my words brimmed with emotion, Ogi's were rather sharp. Her tone lacked any trace of sentiment. She seemed to find this crumbling home extremely displeasing, but not enough for that spirit of investigation at her core to shrivel. She took a look at the nameplate at the gate as soon as she detected a break in the conversation. She took a look, but there wasn't any plate where one ought to go. Only an old piece of rubber tape, rudely stuck there. We didn't even need to try the intercom next to it to tell that it was broken.
Since there's a trace of a nameplate, this place must have been a regular home, right? I mean, there are nothing but homes all around it.
Who knows? I'm not that familiar with this area. I never was. I was never aware of any nameplate as a middle schooler. Ogi really was sharp. Even if we couldn't press the button on the intercom, she knew which buttons to press when it came to fieldwork. But it was to do homework, rather than fieldwork, that I frequented this place. A home. Huh. I looked at the crumbling house again. Despite having slept over in that abandoned cram school like Oshino, I hesitated to walk inside, more because it seemed in danger of collapsing than for any sanitary reasons, but I hadn't come all this way just to look at it from the outside and turn tail. There was no getting off this ride, or rather, what goes up must come down. No, maybe I was only digging myself in deeper here. You know, I called it a haunted house back then.
A haunted house that you visited every day for a whole summer. How spooky. Our tale suddenly turned into a ghost story.
Well, yes. An old-fashioned one. I opened the gate and walked inside. Maybe it was trespassing since someone surely owned the land, but unless I stepped in, the story couldn't unfold. Entering the premises felt a bit like treading into my own mind without taking off my shoes, but that was just another feeling I had to ignore. I had to if I were to face it. If I were to face my past?
Hey, people must live facing the future, but every now and then the past catches up to you, I guess. At least in this case, humans live their lives having forgotten pretty big things. That goes for me too, but when something suddenly triggers our memories, we act surprised. Let's hope all that comes out of this ghost story.
Ogi briskly skipped along the stepping stones behind me, and we arrived at the entrance. A rusted sign, which hadn't been visible from the front gate, hung on its handle, "For sale," Underneath were the name and contact info for a management agency, but the rust made it illegible. I couldn't even be sure the company still existed. This sign wasn't here when I was visiting this place. It must be under new management compared to 5 years ago. It might even have changed hands more than once. That's just how long a period 5 years is, and while the place looked like the same haunted house to my memory-tinted eyes, I had to admit it was a building, not some sort of immortal vampire. It had to change. It was only a haunted house, because that's what I felt like calling it. In fact, it was just a derelict house.
Hey, yes, you're right. Still, I wouldn't want to come by here at night. Let's go home before it gets dark.
Yeah, I know I'm not going to make you hang around with me for that long. I looked at my watch. It was before 5 in the afternoon. At this time of the year, evening turned to night before you knew it. If we really were to go home before it got dark, I basically had no time to waste. I put my hand on the handle. Surprisingly, or maybe naturally, the door was locked. It resisted me. The place did have a new proprietor. Then, no one ever locked the front door back when I used to visit. The door would just open for me. Welcomingly. Well, we could force it open, but why don't we try one of the windows? I'm sure we can find one to enter through. They've been sitting here for the breaking all this time. As I made this lukewarm proposal, Ogi was already getting to it, but she must have only heard the first half. The entrance was weather-beaten, but it still was an entrance, and it was against it that my junior slammed her body. Seriously? Dealing with a stubborn door by charging into it with a shoulder tackle was something I'd only ever seen in crime dramas. Just how obsessed with mysteries was this girl? In any case, whether you've been locked in a room or are going after a hold-up criminal, trying to force a closed door by slamming into it is inefficient. The area of impact is too large, and the momentum spreads out. It's more logical to focus on a specific point, kicking down the door at the area around its lock. When the riot police charges into a closed space, they use a ram as if they're going to sound a temple bell to smash their way in. We needed none of this reasoning, though. The entrance had exceeded its lifespan, and a solid slam from the slender body of a high school freshman brought it down easily.
Okay, let's hurry up and go inside. The neighbors might call the police after hearing that noise.
She hastily entered the building, her already swift actions accelerating further, and I could barely keep up. This should have been a journey through my memories, but all of a sudden it felt like she'd taken the reins, or had she held them from the beginning.
If the police show up, I'll say that we got lost, so make sure our stories are straight.
Why do you seem so used to doing this? I asked with some disbelief, but maybe she actually was. I didn't imagine she was some sort of abandoned building aficionado, given her earlier antipathy, but she must regularly perform various kinds of fieldwork just like her uncle. I suppose she gets questioned by the police or reported to the authorities by neighbors. When we were entering public middle school number, she was on high alert too. Being concerned about the police made her a very delinquent young woman despite her spick-and-span image, but I wasn't too different. We were both on the watch for the authorities as we went about our lives, so I couldn't scold her as her senior. How many faces would I need to do that? 2 wouldn't cut it. Don't worry, I'll give them the same story. Getting lost is embarrassing as a high schooler, but better than getting my whole life derailed.
Getting your life derailed? What's that supposed to mean? Sure, they might get mad at you, but it's not like your whole life is going to get derailed just because you were questioned by the police. For the most part, those kinds of people are on the side of us upstanding citizens. Just how much of a coward are you?
Well, in my case, both of my parents are police officers, so...
Your parents are police officers.
Why did I say that? Both parents in the Araragi household, both father and mother being police officers, was one of my most private facts, and I told as few people as possible some of my most highly classified pieces of information, with help from Hanekawa and even Senjo Gahara. Why leak it to a transfer student I met for the first time just yesterday? It was hard to believe I could only chalk it up to letting my guard down. Yes, my guard had come down visiting this nostalgic spot. What else could it be? But no amount of regret could take back the words that had come out of my mouth. Both of my parents are police officers was powerful bait to a mystery buff like Ogi, and she was acting like a fish on a line I never meant to cast.
Why didn't you tell me? How awful! How could you keep something like that from me? How amazing!
Well, it's not something you'd come out and tell someone you've just met.
What greater tradition is there in mysteries than having a police officer as a close relative? My goodness, I always knew you were a senior deserving of respect, but I never thought you were royalty.
I guess there are a lot of mysteries like that. It did seem more like a TV or film setup to me than a mystery novel motif, but now that she mentioned it, a Japanese detective fiction lion, Mitsuhiko Asami, fit the bill.
In that case, no need to worry. If someone did report us and the police biked over here, your parents could just bail us out. Can't you hear the officer interrogating us saying it already? Oh, I never imagined that you were Commissioner Araragi's son.
Neither of my parents are that high up. And anyway, they aren't the type to bail out their son if he got himself in a fix. I retorted in a pained voice. No, more in pain generally. As much as I didn't want to discuss my parents, it was going to be difficult to change the subject and cut this short without any sort of explanation, given how deeply Ogi had her teeth in it. She really was good at drawing things out of you. I didn't think I was particularly loose-lipped. If anything, they're the kind of strict parents who'd never forgive their kids for breaking rules. They disciplined me as a kid by taking me to the nearest police box anytime I did something bad.
A police box? Now that's scary. I could even see that traumatizing you.
Well, it probably did. Quite the trauma. But it, too, was part of the past that created the present-day me. I consist of many things. I'm built of many things. The issue is the degree to which I'm aware of it, whether I remember it or not. I hate people who don't know what they're made up of, Oikura had told me. Now that I remembered this dilapidated house, I had to admit I saw what she was trying to say. This place, that girl. That I lived having forgotten them did mean I didn't know what I'm made up of. I hadn't remembered, after all. They haven't done it to me in a while, but I can't even imagine what kind of discipline would be awaiting me at home if I got taken into custody. All that time off would only make it worse. Maybe I wouldn't have had to worry about it 6 months earlier, when my parents had half abandoned my high school washout self, but now I was starting to see signs of reconciliation as far as that part of our relationship. I wouldn't want to let it go to waste, even if I was still waist-deep in teen rebellion. So, Oji, I'm going to be as scared of the police as I can. If the worst does happen, I'm sorry, but I want you to play the role of a delicate little high school girl.